Order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now can we have the roll call, please?
Vice President Simon?
Here.
Member Dwin?
Here.
Member Athel?
Here.
Member Kent?
Here.
Member Hughes, who will be sworn in tonight, is going to be a bit late, and I believe President Dice can't make it.
Good. Approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? I would suggest that we move item E down below reports so that she has time to get here. I understand she's coming from her after-school job.
That's correct.
With many responsibilities. I want to respect that. No objections?
No objection.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any, let's have a report out from closed session from September 24th, 2012.
There were no actions taken in closed session at the September 24th meeting.
Very good. Are there any items for public, are there any members of the public that have items that they would like to comment on that are not on the agenda? Public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. Reports. Do we have any reports from CSEA? From ETA? From Annie Yates? David Martinez, welcome.
Hello, thank you. David Martinez, Dad's Club, also a PTO member.
Dave, hey, turn the mic on.
Sorry.
No, it's not on.
They are on switch. Little switch at the, it's on the side.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Dave Martinez, Dad's Club, PTO member. I'd like to announce Annie Yates PTO is tomorrow at 5:30 in the multipurpose room at Annie Yates. Also, the Dad's Club will be kicking off an A's fundraiser in November, just to give you guys a heads up for spring tickets for the A's who have won their division. Yes, thank you very much. And also for ESS, I'd like to announce their PTO meeting. Their PTO meeting is held the third Wednesday of each month, and their upcoming PTO meeting is on October 17th at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll take that as the Emery Secondary School report as well. Student representatives report is, we will delay that until she arrives. And superintendent's report.
Yes, so I just wanted to comment that the traditional Spirit Week activities of the Emery Secondary School were held last week, and they were just awesome. The students did everything from theme-based dress days like Wacky Monday and Team Sport Friday, and they had blue and gold pride like everywhere. It was really beautiful. Student Activities Director Brenda Collins did a terrific job of coordinating the week's activities, including class competitions and a homecoming, a royal crowning of the homecoming court. It all culminated with a football game on Saturday and a dance, homecoming dance that happened at the Senior Center on Saturday night. And I just want to appreciate the city again for allowing us to generously use the Senior Center for the dance. We all know that research shows that when you have an engaged student population with lots of fun and involved activities, that they perform better in their classrooms, and I think that it's just a terrific indicator. The spirit and the volume level at the class competition last Friday afternoon shows that there's a lot of school spirit happening, and I think that it's definitely going to translate into student academic performance and achievement rising as well. Let's see, the city schools meeting was postponed to this Thursday night, so I'd like to let the community know that it is this Thursday, October 11th at 5:30 at the Ralph Hawley Center. Also, just want you to know that cabinet, school site principals, and community service staff have been meeting with the architects. I made an error in my superintendent's weekly message. I said it was the first of 6 meetings, and this was actually the second of 6 meetings, so we'll be having our third this week. So if you, just to let you know, and we're in the schematic phase, and we're getting, providing input to the architects on that process. And our IT department, last month I noted that, just to let everyone know in the community, that we're still undergoing lots of projects associated with the move of the district office to Ralph Hawley, the closing down of the Emery Secondary School here, the ramping up of the site over at Santa Fe, which is the new high school, and also preparing the wellness center for and the PE portables over at the high school for the requisite technology that they need to run efficiently. So we still have some work to do, but we're closer than ever. There was a lot of work that was done this weekend, and we're expecting, and then there was wiring that was put in this weekend, also at over at Ralph Hawley, and we're fiber optic cable and different things like that, and we're expecting all of that to be completed within the next couple of weeks, as we make our move, our district move, over to the Ralph Hawley Center. So those are really the main points that I wanted to let the community know about. Okay.
And as part of the President's report, I've been checking in with a number of our teachers and volunteering to help some of the teachers out in the classroom, and I just want to report I am so impressed by the great work that our teachers are doing, and by the amount of time and effort and preparation for the instruction, and then from what I hear back from the instruction and the two-way communication with parents, teachers reaching out to parents, getting feedback, and incorporating that into their instruction. It's really, as a parent and as a board member, it's really feels very good. I do want one additional heads up to the community, since it wasn't televised. We had a very short city schools meeting because we were not able to proceed at Ralph Hawley at our last meeting, and at that time a new agenda item was requested to be put on the board, which is where we should have our meetings. There was a request by some city council members that we consider having city school meetings at City Hall, and that proposal will be discussed at the next city schools meeting next Wednesday.
This Wednesday.
I'm sorry. This coming Wednesday.
Thursday. Thursday,
thank you.
the 11th.
Thank you very much.
Thursday
this coming
the 11th,
Thursday, the 11th,
at
Ralph Hawley School.
Yes, at Ralph Hawley.
Which is on 61st and off of Doyle. So with that, let us move on to, well, we were going to have Ariel Hughes at this point, but we'll just continue to the consent calendar. Are there any items that people would like to pull from the consent calendar, either from members of the public or from the board? Seeing none? Oh, if there are none, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and second. Without exception, the consent calendar is approved. Let us now move to discussion items. Number one, the YMCA. Roy Miller.
Yes, so the purpose of this item is for the board to review the proposed first amendment to the partnership agreement between the Emery Unified School District and the YMCA of Central East Bay, and where appropriate, give directions to staff regarding next steps. in order to accomplish our new Center of Community Life construction project, as everyone knows, we're going to be moving to the Ralph Hawley Center, the district office, and the YMCA Head Start program. And this is an amendment to the contract to note the move and the change in address. So, Roy Miller, you want to, if there's any questions that the board has?
Sure, I'm not sure there's a lot to add to that. I mean, the YMCA and that Head Start program have been a partner of the districts for a long time now. It's something that we deeply value and want to make sure that not only does it move to Ralph Hawley with us, but it also looks at helping us expand the opportunities for delivering the 0 to 5 services at the Ralph Hawley site as we move along into the future. So we're anxious to move. Head Start's ready to move. If you this is an existing contract, an existing agreement that we have with the Y, and we're simply amending it to reflect their change of location with us. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to try to field them.
Board members, any questions?
I guess the only question I have is, do we know how many students that the Y will be serving at the new location? Because I know now they're serving about 48 students. So I'm going to assume with the increase in facilities, they should be serving more kids than 48. Is that true or not?
So they are expecting to grow, but right now they're taking their current population with them.
Okay.
And they are in the process of developing their own master plan for their 0 to 5 program to grow over the next 3 years.
Okay. So we're not really sure if there will be an increase in student population for, I would say, next year.
Yeah, there won't be this year, Pam.
Right.
I haven't heard anything that says that she's doing it right away,
Right.
But I know that that's part of her
Okay.
goal as well.
No problem. Thank you.
The
Mike, please.
are the bolded items, the language that's been added, or
Yes.
where the language is bold? So has it the blank there should be September 2012? Is that right?
Actually, I think what I'll do, those dates will have to be altered to reflect when the board actually approves this. So I don't know if you'll approve it tonight. I don't know if you'll want to wait till your next meeting. But whatever that actual date is with the board, we'll change that to reflect from October, whatever that date turns out to be, and then we'll change the August date as well to reflect it as a 3-year timeline.
Okay. But in fact, they've already started to use the new space. Is that right? Or not yet?
No, they use the space that's right out here at the corner of
They're still at
53rd and San Pablo.
Okay. I thought they had already.
They have not moved yet.
Okay.
They will move when we move.
I see. Okay. So you're just informing us when what we're approving is the dates as appropriate.
Yes.
The end date in the paragraph at the bottom of page 1, June 30th, 2014.
So
is that a new date?
That
'Cause that's bold.
No, that's actually that hasn't changed.
That's what I thought. But it
The
is bold.
district currently has this agreement that's established with the Head Start program was a 3-year agreement when it was signed in 2011, and so this agreement currently goes through the end of June of 2014.
Yeah. So that's not a new date. I didn't think so. Lastly, just to show you that I'm reading what you sent me, there's a typo on page 2, which you could correct. Last line of paragraph 6. The word "and" should be before independent contractor. Should
And.
Yeah. Just
Yes.
strike the D.
Excellent. Good work, McGrath.
Yeah.
Marceline would be proud.
My only comment is just if our construction, and I know that there's a lot of testing happening on this site that requires people to move, and we don't want any kids in the way of all right, we don't want any kids impacted by testing, but if the testing schedule allows, it would be less disruption to the parents bringing their kids if the move was over the holidays. So you might want to consider that in your discussions with...
So we've talked with Ms. Shaw and the Y about when they would like to move. They don't want to be on this site as the only tenants on the site that are here and active. They actually want to move when we move.
Okay.
So she's arranged that already.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. So this is not an action item if...
It's just first reading tonight.
Yeah, and just as one general comment, I just want to point out that the school district has partnered with the YMCA for at least 12 years that I know of, and they had been here for a long time when I started here 12 years ago. So it's been a very important partnership, mostly because the Emeryville Child Development Center cannot, these are kids that cannot be served or cannot afford the Emeryville Child Development Center. So in terms of being able to serve the whole community, those two programs, Head Start and Child Development Center, together allow us to be able to serve everyone. And I think it's a very important part of what we do. And given all of the data, the kids that get first 5 education do much better when they start school, and quite frankly, many of the Head Start kids and ECDC kids from both programs end up coming to our schools. So we want to make sure that that good work can continue. So thank you for facilitating that.
Okay. Do we know, along those lines, do we know how many of the students currently being served at the Head Start program are Emeryville residents?
That will be a good question when we talk about enrollment, but in the past it's been a substantial number. And I'd like to point out, when we talk about Emeryville residents, it might be more appropriate to talk about Emeryville taxpayers, because quite frankly, a third of our school budget is coming from the parcel tax, which is paid by the business owners. So to the extent we have employees that work for those business owners, their business is paying for the operation of our school. So I would just shift that question to, is it the taxpayers who are there? It's a good question.
I can certainly, I'll talk with Pam Shaw. I don't know if she'd know it if she were here. She'd know it right off the top of her head, but I'll have that answer at the next meeting.
And do we track, I think we do with ECDC, but do we track which of the students that leave the Head Start program go on into the district school?
So Ms. Allen may
we have an enrollment
know that.
I don't
discussion later, and
Right.
maybe we can bring that up during the enrollment discussion.
Sure. Kindergartens we have that come from the Y, or the Head Start program, approximately. I know we had about 10 young fivers this year that came from both ECDC and from the Head Start program.
Let's get a complete...
But we'll have to bring that back another.
Let's get a complete report.
Yeah.
All right, I would like to now go back on our agenda on 2 items. First of all, I'd like to welcome Ms. Hughes for joining us. We're very impressed that you carry a full school load and have an after-school job and find time to come and help us in our decision-making. So first, let me start the evening by thanking you for your dedication to the school district. We really appreciate it. We have 2 items that we have held to discuss on your arrival. One is whether or not you have any reports for the school as student representative.
Last week was our homecoming. We had Spirit Week last week. It was very nice. It was something different. Having it outside was very nice. The homecoming dance at the senior center was nice. I also attended that, and that's it.
I heard a lot of fun that happened at that dance. is rumored to have happened. Good. Well, and every year the student position is reauthorized, and I understand that despite having been with us for an entire year, you're still willing to serve with us for a second year, and I am very thankful for that. So if you would step up to the podium with me, I will go through the official oath of office.
There you go. Take your time. Don't cry, sir. Don't start crying.
Stop.
Even like this. I don't.
The oath or affirmation. So repeat after me.
Raise your right hand.
I,
Ariel Hughes,
do
solemnly swear that
solemnly swear that
I will support and defend
I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of California
of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and to the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
and I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well
and
faithfully discharge
the
duties upon which I am about to enter.
and duties upon I'm about to enter.
Thank you very much. You are now student representative for another year. Would you like to say a few words?
I don't know. I'm excited because it's also my last year of high school, so I look forward to it.
Alrighty.
Terrific. Thank you, Ariel.
Again, I believe I echo the sentiments of the board. Say we are very appreciative of your participation and the perspective that you bring to this board. Your comments on agenda items impact the way we proceed with our decision making. So I very much appreciate your being here. All right, now we will move to a proposed First Amendment to the $2.9 million RDA loan agreement.
Yes, so in July 2008, the City of Emeryville and the Emory Unified School District entered into an amended loan agreement to create capital funding to assist with the renovation of the Annie Yates Elementary School and improvements of a portion of the secondary school. And the loan was based on the redevelopment tax increment payments that the RDA was required to pass through to the district by state law, AB 1290. And the purpose of this item is for the board to consider an amendment to the loan agreement that would terminate essentially the repayment obligation because this loan was based upon redevelopment, and with the pass-through not coming in the same way that it had in the past, we're looking at seeing possible impact to the general fund. And so we're asking that this loan be forgiven, and in your packet you have information in that regard.
The process on this will be for the board to hear it this evening. I hope that you're able to make an exception on this one in terms of first reading. If not, we'll deal with it. But the sequence of events that we hope will unfold here is that the board will consider, hopefully approve this amendment tonight. The City Council, as successor agency to the RDA, Pat O'Keefe, the city manager, plans to take this item to the City Council meeting on October the 16th. And from there, it would go to the RDA Oversight Board's meeting in early November. Assuming that all of those bodies act in approval of this, the Department of Finance at the state level has the right to review the RDA Oversight Board's decision. Whether it would choose to do that or not remains to be seen. The outcome of this would be extremely positive for the school district, so I'm available to answer any questions I can if you have them.
Board member questions? Miguel?
I don't have any questions because I understand it. I'm really more concerned with my other colleagues and maybe the community as far as explaining how it saves the general fund. What does it mean by, the RDA forgiving this loan? What all does that mean? So, Roy, any of that, if you could explain?
Sure. Even though the RDA has been dissolved, the RDA Oversight Board is still obligated to make the pass-through payments that were due to the structures that the RDA put in place. One of those structures was this loan between the school district and the redevelopment agency. The change that's occurred is that the dissolution of the RDA and the change in kind of future projects through the RDA is going to change the amount, or it's going to alter the projected amounts of those pass-through payments. And the obligation schedule that the school district has to the RDA or the successor agency for repayment of this loan is not going to keep pace with, or the pass-throughs to the district are not going to keep pace with the obligations that the district has back to the successor agency in order to repay the loan. The only source that the district has that would make up that difference is the district's general fund. And the projections are that there would be significant impacts to that general fund over the 20 or so years that this loan would be paid back, something on the order of $1.5 million over that 20-year period. It's obviously dollars that the district doesn't have. In this time when the state funds are seemingly forever being cut back to the school district, it's just increasingly improbable that the district would ever have the dollars without severe impact to the general fund to repay the loan. The beneficial impact to the district is actually multiple. Not only does that negative impact to the general fund not occur, but the pass-through payments to the district would still occur. And the district would be able to retain about 57% of those pass-through payments, something on the order of about $80,000 a year, that would positively impact the district's capital projects funds for things like long-term maintenance of facilities. The other 43% of the pass-through payments that the district would still receive offset state obligations to the district. So this is one of those rare instances where not only does the district benefit, but actually the state of California benefits, because a portion of those pass-through payments offset dollars that the state would otherwise owe to the school district.
Thank you very much.
But on the latter point, if I guess I don't understand how the state's gonna owe that money to the school district, the 43%, or we're gonna owe the money. You're saying the state, that's the state's way of paying us for those obligations.
A little bit different. I mean, so what I'm saying is that the pass-through amounts will come to the district from the successor agency. 43% of the amounts that the district receives will not have to be paid by the state. It offsets the state's regular obligation to the district's general fund.
The easier way to understand it is the way districts are paid, it's like filling up a cup. When they fill it up to a certain point, and the more that comes from local taxes, the less the state has to fill. So to the extent that by forgiving this, the cup will be filled a little higher,
So the state won't
from
be
the local,
obligated to...
then the backfill amount from the state is less. So the state wins, we win. I mean, just as background as to why we made this agreement in the first place, back when we made this agreement and redevelopment agencies were expected to last for another 30 or 40 years, there was a certain amount that redevelopment agencies are required to pay the districts for facilities. And so we said, great, we've got facilities in desperate need of repair where we want to borrow against that, those funds. Nobody ever anticipated that redevelopment would be eliminated. It's just without precedence. But then nobody anticipated the greatest economic turn down since the Great Depression. I think that's, perhaps that helps.
Yeah. So, I guess my questions are, and that the document that you provided us with, this First Amendment, indicates that the money could have been gifted.
Yes.
At the time.
Yes.
Instead, it was made a loan.
Yes.
And I think, as I understand what you're saying, is part of the reason that it was made a loan was what Member Simon just said, that no one anticipated there'd ever be a need to go beyond the pass-through.
Correct.
To cover the amounts that would come due.
That's correct.
So, so it seems to me what you're saying is the original intent of the parties, not just the district, but also the redevelopment agency, was to have the pass-through amounts cover the amount of
Absolutely.
the payments that would do.
The object
and not to impinge on the general
Exactly right. The object of the original deal was to help the school district, and certainly not to hurt the school district. But the way that events have unfolded, the school district would be substantially harmed by the repayment of this loan.
The unforeseen events being, number one, dissolution of redevelopment agencies, number two, the Great Recession.
Yes, dissolution. So more than the recession itself, the lack of future project development for the RDA. The idea was that the assets of the RDA would continue to grow over time. Obviously, that's not going to happen.
And the fact that those assets are not going to continue to grow over time, how does that impact our...
It means that the pass-through payments don't grow either, which means that the repayment schedule of the district can't keep up with the obligation of repayment.
Okay. That's helpful. So, it would seem to me to be helpful to have that clarification to the party's original intent part of this document a little more explicitly than I found that here.
Okay, so
that your
paragraph number 6 tries to tackle that, but perhaps not explicitly enough. It says the agency and the district anticipated and intended the district would be able to pay the debt service due under the amended agreement using solely the 56.7% portion of the AB 1290 pass-through dollars that are restricted to use for capital improvements. I mean, that tries to express it. It doesn't tell that whole story, though.
Yeah. So then in paragraph 8,
number 7,
you've got, I think you want to add words like the unanticipated recession, the unanticipated or unforeseen dissolution of redevelopment agencies, and words to the effect that the original intent of the parties was not to have the district general funds negatively impacted, and that it was just completely unforeseen that the pass-through would not cover funds due under the loan. So I think it's... yeah.
My only concern about the proposed amendment, I think if we had more time, that would be very helpful, but I'm wondering if we could have the same intent with maybe a cover transmittal, and to just, re-emphasize those points in a cover transmittal, so that we could make the October 10th,
16th.
the October 16th deadline, yeah.
Or you could maybe approve with this additional language be added.
Yeah. I'm willing to do that.
If that works
That
with...
would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we can make the deadlines, then I think that the additional amendments would be great.
No, I think, with the clarity that Member Adfeld is advising to put into the document, I think it's very wise, because it lets the public, it's very transparent to the public and to the community why this is being done, so I really think we ought to approve with the amendments.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Let me ask, where is the city with respect to, have they seen this document, or?
Yes, so has the city attorney.
Okay, and Patrick O'Keefe has seen this?
Oh, absolutely.
And, I assume City Council has not, but maybe they're aware of it, or I don't know.
They are aware.
Have any update? But are we anticipating... yeah, since you've represented me, that was their original intent. We're not anticipating that they're going to change their mind about what the original intent was of this.
I have no reason to believe that would happen.
Yeah, okay.
No, they're very good comments. This is a very complicated issue, and I think the more clarity and explaining it would do us all well.
And the city is then, going back to your earlier point, also willing to I guess allow the pass-through to the district to continue then?
Yes, they don't actually have a choice about that. That's law.
I see.
Yeah, that's part of the dissolution law.
Okay. And then in terms of what the State Department of Finance response might be, we'll just have to wait and see.
We have to wait and see.
Okay.
But remember, the state benefits.
Yes.
I think any language that helps them to understand that would be helpful, since they have a lot of documents that they look at.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, I don't think that kind of language needs to go in the document. I think it needs to go into the cover report. Quite frankly, I think DOF will read the cover report more closely than they will the document.
So maybe as the oversight board moves on this, you can...
My thought exactly. But
offer a little
again,
advice.
I think that the more language that we put in at the beginning, it's just easier as it moves down the line. So,
sure.
And just so you know, Trustee Affelt, the Peralta Community College System, the Chancellor, and also Supervisor Keith Carson with Alameda County, they're all aware of our request as well.
Okay.
So, Member Simon, what I would ask, if you could take that paragraph from the agreement and ask the Oversight Committee to put that in the transmittal.
which agreement? That's 6 and 7?
At least 6, the part that we're going to be amending to kind of flesh out.
Okay, so let's nail down the amendment so we know what we're voting on. Member Affelt, do you want to illuminate them?
I probably need a minute here to...
Did staff get any of its original amendments that you make?
Yes, it was to paragraph 8.
Okay.
And I understood the points that we needed to add.
You want to just
The
recite them over again?
unanticipated?
That we want to talk about the unanticipated recession, the unexpected dissolution of the RDA, and to make mention of the fact that it was not the original intent of either party to the district that the general fund of the district would be negatively impacted.
So you think that would be better in 6 or 8?
I think it's fine in paragraph 8.
Okay.
I think it speaks to those points.
Okay, so Member Simon, we take that paragraph?
I just want to make sure that our note taker has it
Okay.
all down.
Got it.
Any further? Lisa, do you want to read back the amendment so we can put it into a motion?
So I have that in paragraph 8, there's going to be language saying unanticipated recession due to, is that added on? So due to lower property tax revenues caused by an unanticipated recession and dissolution of the RDA. It is anticipated the amount of AB 1290 property tax funding from former redevelopment funds will not meet the loan debt service payments in future years. So somewhere in here you wanted to say that the intent
It's not the intent of either party
It is not the intent to do harm to the district.
to impact the not the intent of either party,
It was not the original intent.
the original intent
Of the parties
I mean, so
to
this is where,
adversely,
this is, I think, where paragraph 6 jumps into the picture. Because paragraph 6, I think, very forcefully says that the only dollars that the parties anticipated would be used to repay the obligation were the pass-through payments.
Yeah, so I think this sentence can go at the end of paragraph 6, that it was not the original intent of the parties to adversely affect the district's general fund.
May I suggest, rather than wordsmithing the document here at the podium, that we approve the agreement with the addition that we deputize Member Affelt to work with staff, and we are approving the agreement as formulated by our new committee.
Happy to do so.
Excellent. So let me wordsmith that into a motion that I recommend that we have a motion to deputize Member Affelt to finalize the exact wording of amendments to the document, and that we approve the document with amendments in keeping with the discussion tonight.
Second.
Lisa, you have that?
I do.
All right, let's have a roll call.
Vice President Simon.
Yes.
Member Hughes.
Yes.
Member DeWin.
Yes.
Member Affelt.
Yes.
Member Kent.
Yes.
All right, moving on.
That's great. Thank you.
All right.
Measure J, Oversight Committee.
Yes.
By law, Second Amendment.
Yes. So this item here is just to receive information from Roy Miller again. AB 1199 was passed this summer, and this changed the term of the CLC members.
Do you have any board member comments?
And
Could I draw your attention to one other thing? While we were doing this, council also recommended that we catch up with one other item. So I'm going to point, and this is something that the COC is just now discussing, but this one other small change to the bylaws will allow the COC some flexibility in terms of what they want to bring back to you as a recommendation. If you notice, paragraph 5.5 on page 6, there's a very small but very important change there. The last sentence, actually the next to the last sentence, changes one word, and it goes from the board shall fill to the board may fill by appointment any vacancies on the committee or any additional membership on the committee. And then a new sentence is added, the total number of members may not be less than 7. The context for that second piece of this amendment is that the COC is having very serious, they've made no decisions about bringing a recommendation, but they're having very serious conversations about whether a 17-member committee is tenable for the longer term. And so they would like the ability to come back to you with their thinking on that. That's the part. But by law, we have to maintain 7 members. So if we modify the bylaws, they can come back and make a recommendation to you that's greater than 7. 7 or greater, I mean. And what that also means is that if the shall changes to may, then you as a board don't have to appoint replacement members to these vacancies as they occur.
Where did the original impetus for moving it from 7 to 17? Not impetus, I don't want the history.
So that goes, yeah, that goes
into the operative. Was it just the bylaws that required us to do that? Because it's not,
yes.
It's not the measure.
It's not
any external law.
It is not in statute at all.
It was just a choice that we obligated ourselves to do.
It was a choice that the board made, but the input for that choice came from the old Partners for Community Life Committee.
And there was debate on the committee as well.
Absolutely.
But I think the idea was we'd start and see how it worked. So, Member Kent, do you want to comment on as a former member of the committee?
No, other than 17 is a disaster, and I'm all for making it smaller.
All right. Well, we'll leave the ultimate decision up to the committee, but
well, you'll have the decision, but they want to bring back a recommendation.
I want to hear from the committee, but this seems to give flexibility. So,
Yes.
it seems to, since we have it before us, it speeds things up a little bit.
So I'm fine on that. I did have one question on the 5.4 C, the edit. Members who served a 1-year term shall have that term counted against the 3 consecutive term limit. Does that, what about members who served a 2-year term?
So the new law, AB 1199, says that the maximum term for a COC member is 3 consecutive 2-year terms.
Right.
So if you were a COC member who had an initial 2-year term, you will maximize your legal tenure if you serve 2 additional terms. If you were originally a 1-year member of the COC, you will maximize your tenure according to this at a total of 5 years. There's nothing in AB 1199 that says you have to serve for 6 years. 6 years is the maximum that you're allowed to serve. Now the good thing about the good thing about this is that it will get, if the original members, whether they had 1-year terms or 2-year terms, with this change, the original members, if they choose to stay and continue to renew their memberships, all of the original members will see the ECCL project through to its occupancy date.
Okay, let me tell you, my concern is higher that we're not limiting. You may say the statute operates this way, but the bylaws seem, by not mentioning the 2-year term as counting against the 3 consecutive term limit, we're creating an exception and permitting 2-year term servers not to have their term counted against the 3-year consecutive. So
But it does. So that's not the intent. I mean, the original two. The law says a maximum of 3 two-year terms.
Right.
So if you had an original 2-year term, you only get 2 future consecutive 2-year terms.
Yeah. So, well, there are 2 questions. One, is it a maximum of 3 terms of any length, no more than 6 years? That
No,
seems to be what
it's
you're
a
saying.
maximum of, what AB 1199 says is a maximum of 3 consecutive 2-year terms.
So it's covered by the state statute. It's not a whole.
Yeah. So that's,
And so what we're trying to do is to deal with what the state statute doesn't deal with, is the fact that we started with 1-year terms.
We started with some members having 1-year terms.
And so we have a dilemma is, I mean, what we could say is we could say allow them to have an additional 1-year term.
Right.
And then term them out. But I know
we
that
done
gets a
that.
little complicated.
Yeah.
We didn't do that. We didn't extend the 1-year terms when we, because didn't we extended some 2-year term people.
No, we extended some 1-year
1-year
term people. We haven't gotten to 2
you're
years
right.
yet.
It was 1 year. It was one. So we extended those 1 year out to 2.
No,
So
we
do we
extended.
have anybody on 1 year?
No.
Oh, okay.
The only 1-year terms were for the very first year.
Okay.
When the 1-year members entered their, when the 1-year members completed their first year, they essentially became 2-year members. So if they serve out the tenure that they're in, the term that they're in right now,
Right.
they'll be 3 years. And if they choose to go for another 2 years, they'll be 5 years.
So everybody on the COC is covered by this new statutory law. Because everybody's a 2-year
and
member.
thereafter, you have to do 2-year terms?
Yes,
You
there will
can't do
never be 1-year
1-year
terms again.
If we
Right.
wanted to, so that...
So member C is a moot point.
Except unless you're one of the original 1-year members.
And we no longer have those.
But we don't,
We have 1 left.
But now there are 2
in the
2-year.
second year. We have 1, but
No, we have one member who's in the first year of their second term, which is a 2-year term.
But they, in the past, served a 1-year term.
Yeah.
Correct.
don't
In the
have
past,
that.
they served a 1-year term. All of the rest of the people who were in that category are no longer on the committee.
And that one member will serve a 5-year term if they choose to do another second-year term.
But by the same token, I guess I'm not, just as we don't have to explain it for the 2-year term people, it seems like the statute covers C as well then.
I think we're just trying to
But if
be
But I'm not
extra
opposed to
explicit.
being extra explicit.
okay.
Okay, we're fine.
So should we make a change? No change?
Leave it as is.
Leave it as is. Member Kent? Member Gwynn?
No change.
Member Hughes?
No change.
Members of the public? Is there anybody who wants to weigh in on this? No? Hearing none and seeing none, is this a,
We'll bring this back. We'll
this
bring
is a
this,
first reading?
yes.
Okay, then on to the next one.
Just,
Thank you very much.
Roy, there's a typo in 4.1, so on
typo
the second
in-
reading you can,
Type 1 4.1.
second line. Second line, or input space OU. We can
I'm
talk
sorry,
about
tell me
it.
again?
4.1,
Yes.
second line, third
Okay.
half word. But we can,
Yeah, let's deal with this offline. Let's move on to the next item. ECCL update.
Yeah, so obviously the purpose of this item is to give the board and the community an update on the number of ongoing activities related to the Emeryville Center of Community Life. And Roy Miller is here today to give 4 updates. One on the phasing and the timeline and where we are in the entire project process. An update on Measure J, Series D bond sale, and the analysis and consideration of that. And then additionally, an update on staff input that he's received related to the schematic design phase, and he has a couple of contracts here that he'd like to go over with you: the library operations program consultant and the Nexus partner contract related to the $48 million alternative that the board asked us to consider. Roy?
Great, thank you. This first slide is a repeat. You've seen this. I'm bringing it back just to keep it front and center because it's really aggressive, and I know I keep saying that, but I think it bears repeating. The schematic design phase we're about halfway through that now, and it completes at the end of November of this year. And then the design development phase, where we look at the chosen design in all of its aspects with all of the full consulting disciplines, that wraps up middle of April of next year. We go beyond that to finish the blueprints for the project, to get the state approvals in early 2014, and to get under construction, meaning actually digging trenches for brand new building foundations, with a construction occupancy date of August 2015. The milestone dates must be achieved. Each one of these has to happen. No phase that we're looking at has any slop in it. The milestone dates are extremely aggressive, and a full array of consulting disciplines is up and running to get these done. I think I want to add this evening that each day of this project is a learning experience for me and for the entire team. I mean, there are so many people working so hard and so fast at this point that I get new information every day that I come to work, and on Saturdays and Sundays. I mean, things are changing and developing very quickly. For the second piece of this, I want to bring to the full board some information that the Facilities Committee heard at our last meeting, and that has to do with funding and financing considerations that are also developing quickly. There's new information that I want the board to be aware of, not asking you for any decisions on any of this. I just want this information to be in front of you. The first part of this you'll notice and that you've seen before. So when we talk about payback ratios for our bond series, if we take a perspective that we're looking at the whole performance of all of the Measure J bonds, we want to figure out how to think about that and how to frame the performance of that. One of the ways to look at it is with a standard 30-year mortgage at either a 5% or a 4% fixed rate that a homeowner could go out and get today with a very good credit rating. And this would allow you to purchase a home, a primary residence. Those kind of payback ratios are in the 1.7, 1.9 kind of range. The bonds that we've already sold, Series A, B, and C, are down around 1.4 to 1, which is extraordinary and completely due to the fact that both Series A and Series B are highly subsidized, federally advantaged programs called the QSCB program. In looking at Series D, you've looked previously with me at a possible $10 million Series D with a set of 30-year maturities that has a payback, an overall payback, when included with all of the series already sold, of about 1.83 to 1, which is still very good. I went back to the financial consultants, to the bond financing folks, and said, what's the maximum that a Series D sale that this district could do anytime at once, later this year, early next year? What's the maximum amount that could be structured within that same 30-year maturity idea? So let's not change the length of the financing. Let's stick with a 30-year financing. How much could we generate? Just to put a kind of an outside bracket on the board's thinking. And the answer is that it's about $16.5 million, depending on the exact interest rate and the day of sale and all that sort of thing. But a $16.5 million Series D could be done. Its overall payback ratio, when added to all of the other bond series that you've sold, would be just barely over 2 to 1.
And that's different from the $20 million payback ratio you've shown us before, because that was a 40-year?
Correct.
Okay.
So then this is the information that makes your eyes go back in your head, but nevertheless, these are the kinds of spreadsheets that the financial consultants are developing that come up with those numbers. And what's really important, and I think what you can see just from the graphic without actually looking at the individual numbers, the third column from the right-hand side of the screen is a representation of Series D. And you can see immediately that the numbers, without even looking at the specific numbers, that... Did I hit the button?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, that's right.
Whoops, back.
Well, while you're on that back
There.
screen there, actually I had a question. The payback ratios at the bottom, is that at 4% or 5%?
It's at today's interest rates. I don't know exactly what the interest rate of that sale would be,
Okay.
but it's at the today's what the deal that could be done today. So the interest rate risk would be, if the board postponed the sale, would the interest rate be higher or lower than it is today? So what I was going to point out just graphically is that you can see in that Series D column that all the big numbers are in the bottom years. And you can see that the numbers increase in size when the columns for Series A, B, and C go blank. That means that those bonds are all paid off. That's when the bulk of the repayment for Series D would occur, in those 10 years or so that are after Series A, B, and C are completely paid back. That is what's called a capital appreciation bond, CAB for short, and this is the same spreadsheet for that $16.5 million series. And the important difference is the very right-hand column. The amount of assessment per $100,000 value of property in the $10 million sale, in those later 10 years, the assessment drops to about $30 plus or minus per 100,000. In order to maximize Series D, you hold that number at closer to $60 per 100,000 all the way out through the repayment of Series D. The reason that I mentioned that the Series D bond is called a CAB, a capital appreciation bond, is because there's a lot of press these days about capital appreciation bonds. And so I want to add one more comment to this as the board thinks about this. There is proposed legislation, has been already and will continue to be, proposed legislation that may change these circumstances in the future for the sale of Series D. The legislation that's been introduced already but has not passed at this point says a couple of things. It says that instead of doing a 30-year financing for Series D, because it's a CAB, the board would be limited to a 25-year financing for Series D. That would impact the amount that Series D could be. We would not be able to do a Series D for $16.5 million if that becomes law. And then the second thing, which is a very good...
Is that state or federal legislation?
This is all state of California. And then the second thing that the legislation that has been introduced but not yet passed says is that the maximum payback ratio for that specific bond series, not the overall performance of all your series, but for that specific bond series, cannot be greater than 4. And even at 16.5, even at the 16.5 bond sale, because it's a 30-year sale, the payback ratio is 3.8. So the law, the new legislation, if and when it's passed, if it reads the way that it's already been introduced or something close to that, we would still, even though we're a 30-year series rather than 25-year series, we still meet that payback ratio threshold. But we would be impacted by the fact that the allowable maturity schedule may be shorter than the 30-year that we're using here.
So, and that was a measure in the last session of the state legislature, so the question is what will be introduced
Will it be
next year?
reintroduced, except
So
yes.
I think
'cause,
that's a good
the
point.
session's
to monitor.
over.
Yes.
And the session's over and it didn't pass.
It did not pass.
But I think it's a good heads up. I think what it does do is it gives a good guideline as to what the state discussion is
Yes.
for this kind of financing. And I think what I find interesting is that although there's been, accusations about comments about the payback ratios, we're actually well within the payback ratios that are being recommended at the state.
Even proposed for legislation.
But
yes.
I think that the main concern I have is the advice I've heard from a number of bond councils that it's best to issue a bond when you need it and not to issue it so far in advance that we're paying interest on money that's just sitting around unused. And we have a lot of other issues that we're trying to wait and see what happens, such as this $2.9 million issue that we heard earlier. So, but this is a very helpful update. Were there other questions?
If, for example, we issued a $10 million bond, Series D, and later said, you know what, we need another million or two, can we issue
You're kind of out of luck.
yeah, what are the negative impacts or downside of trying to tweak it?
It would be very difficult to get any additional financing because it would have to be it would have to be far in the future. In other words, it would have to be beyond. It would have to be in that increment that's out beyond the current A, B, and C. And the I think CABs are not easy to issue, and they're not easy to issue in small increments. So I think you would find it difficult to garner those little bits of extra dollars if you needed them.
Okay.
I think the other issue, so the longer we wait, the more refined we know about what we need, and the longer we wait, the more we know about what's going to happen in the economic environment around us. And we have this, for once we have a good break in that we have the head of the Treasury Department saying that interest rates are going to stay low for the next, well, he said it 6 months ago, and so I think we have 18 months left.
So here's the hard part. And the board is just going to have to play this out over as time goes on here. I think I will predict. Remember, I told you that we're now halfway through the schematic design phase, and I learn a ton about this project every single day. I predict, and I'm sometimes wrong, so who knows what will happen, but I predict that when you're asked to approve schematic design, you're going to have some very hard choices to make. And you're going to have to give direction to the architect and builder team about exactly where they're going and exactly what they're designing. Having an outstanding unknown about how much money you can put together is going to make it tough on you. So add that to your thoughts.
Say that last sentence again. Having
an unknown relating to how much money you can put in the bank to sign this construction contract is going to make it harder, not impossible, harder for you to give very succinct and articulate direction to where the architect and builder teams need to head.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
And then last piece for me tonight, there are a couple of contracts that have come up in this past few weeks. The first one is for a library operations and program management consultant. The Nexus team is employing a library design consultant, someone who actually physically designs libraries. This consultant has been working with that team, but under our contract. This consultant is the one that actually looks at how we think about this library as a part of a public library system, how we think about staffing and managing this future library. They're the folks who help us put together the operations model for library at ECCL. And so this contract takes them all the way through the process of developing that model with us. Any questions about that one?
I don't see any questions. Do any members of the public have questions about any of the ECCL items that have been discussed? Hearing none?
The only question on the library is this is for both the school library and the community library, how they're going to work together?
Yes, but I have to say it's mostly about the public library, but absolutely how those things work together and how we maximize those opportunities, that's also part of their scope.
And are these folks planning to talk to the librarians and the teachers?
They already have.
The school staff?
They've already done interviews with not just library staff, but with staff in general, and even parents and even students as well.
I'm just going to make a comment in general about these contracts, and I know, everything is a deadline. We're working really hard to, to get things done, but, these contracts really should be coming to the board before services is performed. We had a board.
This one is. This one is. They have not done this yet.
The library?
They've done some work with us, but they did that under a small initial contract.
This
The
is a
library one.
subcontractor.
That was last spring.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah. This is work that's coming up.
Okay, my apologies.
And I see that they're contracted to attend the community meetings and participate in them, and I think it's all very good. My understanding is they're focusing their work on having Alameda County operate the library.
So I don't know what the conclusion will be.
Okay, so
That is one of the issues that we'll be investigating.
Okay, well that's very good, and that will help as we enter into the governance discussions, which I think it's critical for us to move.
And both of these, both of the consultants that are involved here have been Alameda County librarians and Alameda County library managers, so they know the system upside down.
Right. Excellent, excellent. This is not a first reading, so do we have a motion?
Wouldn't these come back on consent?
It can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can bring them back
to bring
next
them on
meeting.
consent?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
And then I also want to point out the second one. Now, this one is an exception, and I apologize for this, but this one is work that has been done. This was the work that we asked the Nexus team to do to generate that feasibility study for us. I can't tell you how hard it was for them and for all of us really to get them up and running again on the conceptual design work, and also pay it time and attention to doing a really good job of this feasibility analysis. And I think they did a superb job. And that information is going to pay off for us in ways that we didn't even imagine. I mean, I think it got them very, very familiar with the existing set of facilities around here. It's going to help us from now on in terms of demolition plans and all the rest.
Okay, so this work is being applied to the ongoing work, so that sounds good. Any other questions about this? Nope. So all this.
Only that it was work that we asked be done. I was surprised at the $137,000 price tag, but it was important for us to have understanding of the contingencies, given all the contingencies that were out there, whether or not redevelopment money is going to come through, whether or not the state's going to contest or take issue with that. So I'm glad we did it. I guess in the future, when we take this kind of action, I think it behooves us as a board to also get a cost estimate for the implications of the decisions that were made.
Right. I think in all fairness to staff, the dilemma is, given the time frames we're on, because of the delays that we had with redevelopment, you know, it's put us months behind schedule. I think staff was right to move forward as they did at our direction. But I think we as a board have to be very careful of the additional work that we ask for, and cognizant that to keep the schedule, we have a choice. You know, we need the information because we're making tens of millions of dollar decisions, but there is a cost to that.
Could I also say that
doing that at this speed?
And I agree. I'm agreeing. I think we're in agreement.
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
Exactly.
I didn't ask the question.
Right, the board.
I didn't hear any of us ask the question. How much is this going to cost for us to get this?
I wouldn't have known on that first occasion. In fact, so what I wanted to add to the conversation is, just so the board knows, I don't take these contracts lightly, and the $137,000 that you see is not the first number that I saw. Mm-hmm. It's significantly lower than the first number that I saw.
We appreciate your whittling that down.
And it's a fair representation of the work that they and their team did.
And as you said, tens of thousands of dollars of that are going to continue to inure to the benefit
Absolutely.
of the work.
They learned a lot through that.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else on this? If not, we'll move on, and these will be on the consent calendar for the next meeting. Enrollment report.
Yes, so this is the purpose of this item is for our CBO, Mark Bonet, to give the board an update on our fall enrollment for the 2012-13 school year. Mr. Bonet?
I like that.
Well, the good news is our enrollment is higher than what was originally projected in the adopted budget 2012-13 that the board adopted in June. Our enrollment numbers total 755 students as of October 2nd. The breakdown by grade levels: kindergarten had 66, first grade 60, second grade 66, third grade 64, fourth grade 51, fifth grade 55, sixth grade 58, seventh grade 54, eighth grade 52, for a total elementary enrollment 526 students. Ninth grade was 57, 10th was 64, 11th 60 students, 12th grade 48, for a total secondary enrollment of 229 and a total of 755. So we've increased over last year about 38 students, which is good both fiscally and our class sizes are growing, and we are retaining students as they're progressing from the 8th grade into our high school. Our district class size average is going up, and this was as a result of some layoffs that occurred last year. What I found typically in other districts, the average class size is somewhere up in the mid-20s, about 25, 24 at a unified district. So we're slightly overstaffed, and we are overstaffed at the high school level.
What's the ratio? What's the student to teacher
18.
ratio? 18?
The average is about 18, yes.
18 students to every one
8 to
teacher.
1. That's district-wide.
That's district-wide, yes.
So what do we
That
have-
also includes your special ed teachers and your prep teachers that provide prep time at the elementary level.
So what's the high school ratio in? If the district-wide is 18 to 1, and you're saying we're overstaffed at the high school, what is the ratio at the high school?
I can come back to the board with that ratio, but I will tell you that we're overstaffed by about 1.4 FTE at the high school.
Okay. You can bring that back, that'd be nice.
But it looks like you're projecting more enrollment for next year with particularly the senior class. Both the senior and 11th grade classes. So I'd want to make sure that we make our staffing decisions accordingly.
And that we will. We're using the cohort method, and what I'll be doing is taking an average of that 11th to 12th grade over the last few years and what those were and how those cohorted across as we make our final enrollment projections and staffing ratios.
The other factor that I would ask for us to keep an eye on going forward is to work with the city on when the new family housing is going to be completed, because we'll have a number of new residents, particularly moving into the Ambassador building.
Yeah.
And also the new buildings under construction on Hollis and on over at by Christie. So those buildings will all add to the number of family units in the city. And I think we need to make sure that, one, that our parents have the opportunity to move into those units as they come over, so they're not being priced out of the city. But secondly, to the extent that families move in, they're likely to go to the local school. Other comments?
If I'm not mistaken, our budget projection for this year was below 700, wasn't it? I thought it was 687. Or
Right. Our ADA is a percentage of our enrollment.
That's true.
And history
what's our
is
ADA based on?
history has shown it's about 93% of our enrollment.
Okay. So what does that work out to?
About 685, something like that.
Okay. So we're about where
Yes.
we thought we were going to be budget-wise. Okay.
Actually, we looked at that this afternoon as we sat down in an earlier meeting today.
You know, to kind of follow up what Member Simon was saying, as far as communication and outreach, I actually live in the north area of Emeryville, and I'm seeing a lot of school-aged children in the morning walking to school, and they're not our students. So, and I know the communication committee is having meetings, but, it would be nice to see a more concentrated effort also on the communication and marketing of our district, with our existing residents in our community. And, how we figure that out, I don't know, but I do know that there are a lot of children, in the North Hollis area that are not coming to our district. And I'm looking at the projections even for next year. I mean, I'm really concerned about the 5th, 6th, and 8th grade, with those cohorts being at 55 students and below. When we want our maximum cohort to be 60, that's really concerning to me that we're not getting at least 57, 58 in those classes, in those classrooms, And also, I really want to pay strong attention to the 12th grade, because it seems like we're losing, at least within the past couple of years, we're losing our 12th graders down to, less than 50 students a cohort. So if I would have any kind of wants or follow-up or updates with, or just watching, keeping an eye on enrollment and attendance, those 4 grades for next year would really be important to me to see if we can maximize out to our cohorts in those grades.
So part of, excuse me, just one second. I just want to make a comment. When the principals give their recruitment update to you, we can bring back their plans for how they plan to deal with outreach. And one of the strategies in the plan is to backfill cohorts. So so that we always have or strive to have the 60s. So in some classes they may be waitlisted, or we may add over. So that's where in some cases you see 66 students. There is a certain level of mobility in Emeryville, so we anticipate that, but we are completely aware. And if you look at that class that you're talking about, the junior class, next year's class of 2000, let's see, this is 13-14, class of 2014. If you go all the way back to the 8th grade, just in a diagonal line, we've only lost 3 students based on this. If you look at from the 8th grade in 2009-10, and then if you go down to 10-11, those 8th graders came to 9th grade. All 63 of them came to the 9th grade. And then we did lose a couple last year, and I believe when Miss Allen, in her role as principal, gave her recruitment plan, she talked about the fact that there were some parents that left, and also Miss Latham moved out of the area because of jobs or that sort of thing. So, and we were able to also backfill to increase by 1 in that junior class.
So I mean,
it's a big story.
When are they bringing that the enrollment update back to the board?
I'll have to look on the on our matrix.
It's on our schedule.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But Mr. Simon, you do make a good point with regard to the district getting the message out there that our class sizes, as compared to districts that are surrounding us, are below 30. A lot of districts that are, because of the financial crisis in the state of California, have really increased class size. And even though it's not our intent to keep them this low, they are low as compared to other school sites and other school districts. And if we get that message out there, we might be able to bring back some more kids.
That is part of the draw of our small schools.
It certainly was a draw for me, in part, knowing that we're maintaining class sizes of 20 in K-3 and a 180-day school year, which, many districts have had to back off both of those things. On that point, what are the limitations on us? Because we're not actually at 20, we're at 66 in a number of the grades, or 2 of the grades, K and 2, and 64 and 3. And I know we have some leeway with the collective bargaining agreement. And we do anticipate some attrition, but it seems like we don't have a
class size is different than the collective bargaining agreement, which is 30-1. So we're still
even for K to
yes, we're still underneath it, and the average now. In fact, we've just posted a notice to our website, a letter to our website. My October message describes that, and I believe we are in our kindergarten classes anywhere from 20 to 22 students to 1.
So is that what we're now?
Still.
Are we changing our, I guess, message to the community that come to Emeryville and you'll have a 20 to 22 kindergarten to 3 class size? Because the 20 to 1 is an attractive number.
And 20 to 1 is often where we end up. I think my experience of our enrollment is that we actually, because of the number of condos in this town, we have a lot of mobility. And the numbers that we start the year are rarely the numbers that we have at the end of the year. And so I think it makes sense to have a class, if you start out a class of 22, by January, that class will be 20 or 19 or 18.
I mean, that is what Ms. Lathan has told me,
Yeah.
that it will, we will lose some folks, so I understand that. You know, by the same token, I was standing in my son's kindergarten class Friday morning, which was the 4th after the date of this, and a brand new student walked in with his parents. They had just moved their Emeryville residence, and so now we're at 23. You know, I welcome them as a board member to the district, and I'm glad we have them. But anyway, I mean,
So we could not add a 4th class with 5 students in it.
Sure.
So we do have to spread them out in the kindergarten classes, and we're very mindful. Ms. Latham is very aware, you know, of the number of students, and we are striving very hard to keep our class size at 20-to-1 K-3.
Yeah, that's great.
With the state fiscal crisis, the state of California has relaxed the penalty on K-3 class size reduction. There are districts that have K-3 class size reduction. They're receiving dollars, but their class sizes are at 30. They get 70% of the entitlement for that class, but they're still receiving class size reduction dollars. And most districts have at least gone up to 25 in K-3 because of the fiscal crisis.
Yeah. So do we get less dollars when we have 22 or 23?
No, because we don't get the penalized. The penalty is a graduating scale. The more kids you start having, the higher the penalty goes. So we're still in a good band at 21, 22.
Okay.
It's when you get past 24 is when
Yeah.
the penalties really start kicking in.
So I calculated at 93%, we're at 702. 703 if you add my new family on Friday. So if that holds, then actually we'll be a little above budget, ADA projection.
Well, P2 ADA happens April 15th.
I see.
So it's the when that gets reported.
It's not the CBED's October count date.
Right.
Okay.
And we also would like to encourage every student to come to school at least one more day so we can have a higher goal.
Okay, I would be remiss in a discussion of enrollment if we didn't hear from our graduating senior about any other comments you have on what we can be doing to make this more attractive school. But I don't want to put you on the spot either, so having just put you on the spot. But do you have any comments you'd like to make? Other than how important it is that we do the end of year senior event that everybody looks forward to?
I think the best thing is, like, as far as having a big, like, graduating with a big senior class. Like, I don't know, we have always wanted a big senior class to graduate with, because, you know, you see other schools and you're like, oh, there's like 100 kids graduating. They're like, oh, well, we only have this many kids. But I don't know, I guess it's also nice to have a small, because, like, we all connect with each other, we all know each other, and, like, we all, like, we've been with each other for a long time. So I guess it's a good and a bad thing to it too.
Excellent. Well, we try to create a sense of family. Thank you very much. If there's nothing else on this item, are there any questions from the public? No? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item. Thank you very much, Mark. This is a very good report, very helpful.
Thank you.
Let's move to curriculum and instruction quarterly update.
Yes. So this purpose of this quarterly curriculum instruction update is to provide the board with information related to the curriculum, curricular content in our courses, and also the curriculum material that we're using in our courses as well. So this is not the Williams quarterly report and the sufficiency report, which you will hear at our next board meeting. And I have Director Allen here to go over that information with you. Okay, she needs a second to load her PowerPoint.
While Ms. Allen is working on that, just one thought on the last item. Many years ago, there was talk of the Chamber of Commerce and the school district having a welcome basket for people who move to town. So for Member Dwin's comments about the new people moving into town, it might be for the agenda item for your liaisons with the business community. It might be a nice way to welcome the new condominium owners who are moving to town. We're going to have quite a few of them.
I'll make sure that in my meeting with Bob Cantor that he knows of your interest and desire.
Welcome, Ms. Allen.
Hi, thank you. So this is the curriculum instruction, right? So today, in terms of the curriculum instruction, so this is a quarterly report, which is one of 4 for the year. But my purpose of this presentation is just to give you the areas of focus in terms of curriculum and instruction and our goals. And so a lot of the information that I shared it with the curriculum committee in terms of the 2 board members, Member Alfeld and President Dice who participate on that. And also, I tried to incorporate some of the comments that I know Member Dwin and Member Simon that you all had talked about in the last board meeting when both principals presented their fall presentation. So at the end, definitely, I'll always welcome questions and comments, and then also it'll give you a chance to talk about what are some of the things that you would like the committee to talk about to bring back to the board as well. So the areas of focus in terms of this year is to address our instructional model, K-12, to address the K-12 program alignment, and to address the ECCL core program development. And so this includes staff involvement and feedback with our instructional leadership team, whole group meetings, committees, individual and small group meetings, surveys, and feedback forms. So this is how staff will engage in terms of these areas of focus, and then there'll be other opportunities for parents to participate in some of these areas of focus as well. The first area of focus is the instructional model. And so one goal is to clarify the definition and philosophy of it. And so basically our instructional model includes everything we do in instruction. And so this year the outcomes is to create a document that will clearly explain and document the EUSD instructional model, which includes essential practices such as instructional delivery, response to instruction and intervention, cycles of inquiry, data analysis, etc. And that's both on the social and academic side. So whatever it is that we do that we feel that is important in instruction, the goal is to include that in a document. So although it may need to be modified next year or the year after, I know a lot of times, particularly as board members, is there anything that you all can actually place your hands on to give a synopsis or to state what we do in terms of instruction? I think that's important for not only parents to have, but board members to have, and also teachers to have. So it's not a guessing game each year, and particularly for any teachers who come in that are new to the district. So that's the focus or the goal this year with the instructional model. There's a lot of things that we do now, but we just don't necessarily have it documented so people can actually visually see what we do. Also included that is describing and outlining the job embedded staff professional development and growth practices, and doesn't necessarily, and again, it serves as a model, but the more information that you all have, then it'll allow you all to think about what are those budget and policy implications. So information that you have, again, does it, so it won't be an arbitrary comment in terms of do we need to change board policy, but you actually have something that will inform you to think about policy. And when when you all have to make decisions on budgets, then you will have something that you can actually address or refer to. So the next area of focus is the K-12 program alignment and our initiatives. And so while it may be some other areas that you all want to include, but the ones that are in our forefront is scope and sequence. And scope and sequence is just addressing what we do now in terms of what are those milestones in terms of what kindergartners should learn, what third graders should learn, what fourth graders should learn. Not only what should they learn and be able to do at the end of the year, but what instructional materials may support that as well, or any developmental supports that students may need in terms of depending on what grade level they're in. Scope and sequence will then be addressed and will, in terms of the Common Core. But this year, we need to understand what Common Core is and roll out or think about what that implementation process will be. I think by 2014-15 is when the goal is to have Common Core actually implemented in all districts. But right now, what many districts are, some of them have adopted that, and they're having their teachers actually, they're in the stage where the teachers are processing it, understanding how do they actually align current standards to the Common Core standards, and then other districts are sending district teams to go through a process in terms of understanding what the Common Core standards are, what's the best way to implement it in your district, because how one district does it doesn't necessarily mean the other district can do the same thing due to different resources, and that's what I'm learning in our curriculum committees, that each district is different, and it really depends on the resources that they have, the time available, et cetera. So there's not a one shot or one way to do it, but there are several workshops that are out there now, ranging from a 7-series workshop to 2-day workshops to a weekend workshop in terms of how to actually implement the Common Core standards. Another area in terms of K-12 program alignment is instructional strategies, and I'll just go down the list. Socially developmental strategies, technology and media, extracurricular opportunities, instructional materials, instructional design, defining loop, core, and block, schedules, assessments and evaluation, alternative education, and I believe, and it may be some others that you all may want to include, but the main goal this year is to actually identify and create the documentation. It may not be implemented to the best of its ability. It may not be as efficient as we would like. However, what I know we've brought before the board, I know there are board members who are also concerned, is when we bring initiatives, we'll bring an initiative, have a pilot for it. The next year, there's another pilot. Then the next year, there's another pilot. And then we haven't really taken the time to state, this is the initiative, or this is what we want to focus on, and actually develop it over the next 3 years or 2 years. So this year it'll give you all an opportunity to see what we're doing, how developed is it. It may not be in the implementation stage. It may be we have a program, but no one actually uses it. So, but it'll give you all an opportunity to look at what those are, because it'll have policy and particularly budget implications, down the line when you all have to make those budget decisions at mid-year and at the end of the year. For this, are there any other initiatives? I know, Member Simon, you talked about, I think you and Member Dwayne talked about initiatives, but I'm not sure. Are there any that's not here that you all know of that we've talked about?
I have a question, and you can tell me if this is an initiative or not, or where does it go. I was in the classroom today, and it had to be either 7th or 8th grade. And in the classroom, it had on the board, in writing narratively, and on the sideboard, a calendar telling the student what they would be covering throughout the week. And what they would be covering, when they could expect some type of writing assignment, and then when they would have a test due. Okay, and then also I seen on the wall for English literature, it described what a persuasive paragraph, what a descriptive paragraph, and what an informative paragraph is and what that consists of. So what would that be considered? Is it an alignment? Is it an initiative? Is it something dealing with allowing the students to, having students to know what their expectations are throughout the week or throughout the month? What would that be considered?
So under 2 areas, so under here, the K-12 program alignment, it's instructional, some of it is instructional strategy, or what we call quote-unquote a best practice. So you would look to see if it happens in one classroom, how does it live K-12? If that's one that we choose, that's a best practice. The other area it sounds like it's also part of the instructional delivery model. So our instructional model. So basically, when students come into the classroom, they should know what they're going to learn throughout the week. They should know what they're going to learn that day. They should know how it incorporates in the unit planning. So it's both of those areas.
And how they're going to be assessed.
So are we doing any of that in our instructional strategies?
Yes. So the goal, again, is to identify those. Okay. What are those that are the best practices? Okay. How does that look K-12 developmenally? Okay. Thank you. Any other initiatives that you all see or don't?
The other board members before I comment. Member Kent?
Why don't you go ahead and I have one kind of summary comment.
I guess what I'm looking for is, where do we set the bar in terms of the rigor and consistency within our classrooms? So in some classrooms, a teacher will assign writing assignments every day, they'll be reading every day, and then next door, same grade, it'll be every week. And there's just a disparity in the intensity of information that kids are getting. And I'm looking for, how do we even that out and set the standard for all teachers, so that there's a standard expectation as to the rigor.
So 2 areas. One, you're looking at your, again, dressing similar to Member Dwayne's. 2 areas, you're looking at the what and you're looking at the how. The what is it in your instructional model? So the instructional model is what, well, actually it's in your scope and sequence. What is it that we're teaching? So the scope and sequence means from kindergarten to 12th grade, if you're looking at a strand, say writing, then what does that look like and what are the expectations kindergarten through 12th grade? In terms of how it's delivered, that's your instructional model. So the type of rigor, or whether you deliver that and it's a unit that lasts over 2 days versus 4 days. What's the assessment piece? How do you know if students learned what you taught? That's part of the instructional model. So it lands in 2 areas.
Okay. Yeah.
So based on that, for an update, I would like a further update whenever on the scope of sequence and the instructional strategies.
Okay, you want an update on everything, but that is, yes.
I mean, when we have,
Yes, I hear you. I understand.
Let me make a comment. One of the things that I think I'm hearing, actually, from the Masters in Governance course, I think it might be really good if we were to divide those out into 3 categories. It's called the CIA, is what the board needs to remember: curriculum, instruction, and assessment.
Right.
And so that's what the work is this year, to do that alignment in those 3 areas, and that's what Ms. Allen has up there right now. So, and we can line it out differently so that you can see it that way.
And I think that is true. And for board members who've been here, and when you've heard the different ideas, it'll also go through a transition into that. So the update is not bam, here it is, and here's the end goal, but it's actually to lead you into a transition. So again, when you understand what it is, then you have more information to actually make informative decisions about budget and about policy.
All right.
The other question is sort of answered by the next slide, which is the intersection of the initiatives and the outcomes.
So
I had always seen STEM as an initiative, but you're saying that it's an outcome.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could let's get
Member Raphael's comment on this last slide.
Yeah, on the last slide. Sort of 2 comments. One, and this gets to your point, Member Simon, that it seems to me part of talking about maintaining the level of rigor leads to the evaluation question, we talked about this in the committee, and I think it needs to be a part of the prior slide. It's for the board to understand how we're evaluating our teachers to make sure they're delivering the scope and the sequence that we've laid out, and how we're providing the professional development that's making sure when they're not, that they're put back on track so that they are doing it.
So when you look at in the instructional model, when you think about assessments, you have to make sure that you don't get into the territory of issues of how they, their evaluation in their contract versus how we evaluate, how we actually support them, which is why you see it in the professional development. So the whole professional development model helps support teachers, and they go through a cycle of inquiry so they can be accountable. Now, what you can do, that is because there's a difference between evaluating a teacher versus evaluating a program. So when you gather the data from students, you can evaluate a program and state, this is not working, or this practice works and this practice doesn't, and so therefore you can provide growth plans for teachers to support them. So I think, well, and maybe it could be me, but when you state evaluate, that sometimes get into that touchy area of your contract. So I'm very cognizant of assessment and evaluation in terms of looking at our programs. The instructional model, it's part of when you talk about cycles of inquiry or peer observations or response to intervention, there is those particular practices or piece of work comes from the teacher piece accountability and the support we give them as a district.
So I want to know, as a board member, I do want to know how we are evaluating individuals, teachers. I want to understand the contract, and I want to understand the evaluation process.
And I think that,
because I think that is part of delivering the curriculum and instruction.
I think
at the same time, I want to understand the professional development and support piece. Now, I think 2 or 3 board meetings ago, you and I had a conversation, and you were clear that those are 2 separate things, and I think that's a problem. But this is a bigger contractual issue in a conversation with the union. I understand, but I think the teachers that I talk to agree that the evaluation process should feed into the professional development process. They shouldn't be 2 separate spheres.
it should, but it's not written that way right now.
So I want to understand both.
That's right. So I think that case,
I think the board wants to.
yeah, I think in that case, that is something that Ms. Harrell needs to bring forward in terms of human resources. That piece of evaluation is separate from this. Should it be connected? Maybe down the line. That's the information that you have to inform, whether to inform direction to the superintendent, to inform, if it has any information for, again, budget or policy implications. So I hear what you're saying, but I also know the reality, and there may be some teachers who feel like that. All teachers don't, and I would never want to place anyone in a position where we have to, I wouldn't want to place anybody in a position that's uncomfortable.
I think we hear that, and I think the point is that we really need to, I think it's a good point to be very clear about understanding both our agreements, but also understanding how we support our teachers and families to do the best work. And I would like to add one point onto this, is that we really work in partnership, and the students who do best are the students who are getting help both at school and at home. So I think there's one other, I guess we'd call it an initiative, which is I don't see how we're supporting our parents to support their kids, and how that home-school connection.
So you'll be receiving that report on the 14th, I believe, of November.
So I'll do a parent policy presentation, and then when you look at what your policy is right now, what framework you may, think about a framework to consider, then that's another area to actually have a deep discussion about.
But I think in terms of our discussion of how we're supporting our curriculum, rather than dealing with them in silos, I think it's critical that we have discussion that's tied into what do we expect of our curriculum that part of that curriculum is contact with the parents.
I do hear you, and so what I am presenting is the bandwidth in terms of what we can get done this year. So I hear you, and I think we have to take baby steps to get to that, which is why so sometimes you present things separately so you can understand it deeply so you can align it. The purpose of this is to focus what the goals are, curriculum instruction in terms of the school, and then, what are ways that we do get parent input. But when you think about the parent input, you also want it systematic, so it's not haphazard every year.
I understand.
So I understand where you're coming from. I do. And I understand the purpose here is basically what are those goals, and if that's a goal, once I do the parent policy and you all think about the policy, if that's a goal, then at that time, then you can state this is the goal that we would like to add to curriculum and instruction. Does that make sense?
No.
So you need to understand first what we do, what we don't do. Otherwise, what it seems like is that if you don't understand or assess what we already do, then it's hard, then it won't give you the most information to modify and move to another, and make an informed decision to state this is how we want it to connect. So I think, for me, I think when I present that presentation, then I think you'll see that connection, and so it won't be, that's a goal here. It's not a goal to include, to state this is how we're going to include parent participation. That'll be done when we talk about parent policy, because technically we always talk about parent involvement, but we don't really have a structure, a systematic structure to include parents. And so when you identify that and you analyze it, then you're more able to state these are the pieces that we want to move in this direction to address how parents are involved in curriculum and instruction.
Strategy.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry if I was long-winded, but I was
This is a very important point. Whenever I talk about our schools, I often get the question of, well, what's happening with the PTA, or in our case, it's a PTO, but is there parent involvement? And as soon as somebody says, oh yeah, they hear we have a parent involvement, they say, oh, must be a good school, because the best schools have the most parent involvement. So finding ways to make sure that we continue, David Martinez puts a lot of work in, but we need to be able to support the hard work that people like David do, and the other parents coming up. So.
So I think what takes care of that is a structure, something that's sustainable. What framework do you want to use, and do you have a policy that actually supports the work that you want to happen with parents?
Excellent. Are there other comments?
Yes. So just to conclude, I'm not suggesting we review any individual teacher's performance.
Okay.
What I am suggesting is that we know, whether you provide that directly from Ms. Harrell or through you, but we understand how we evaluate teachers if they're not providing the level of rigor and scope and sequence and instructional strategies that we're expecting of them.
No, and I hear you. I think maybe my issue may be getting hung up, and maybe we need to find another word for evaluation. I just don't want I don't want anyone to not be able, like teachers to be able to take risk and to be able to be vulnerable and be able to actually talk about their data if there's this constant fear that it's connected. It may be down the line, but right now it isn't. So I think that's probably, but I hear you and I understand. So what's the support that we give, and how do we know if what's happening in the classrooms are working?
Superintendent, it may be appropriate to have a special session for the new board members to go through the contract and to understand, because I think your point's well taken. It would be very helpful to understand how our contract works, and I know Henry Durr did that with us when we started many, many years ago, and it gave a baseline that allowed me to understand a lot. So perhaps we could do that?
Yeah, I'd love that.
We are actually just beginning that process. We'll be meeting with General Counsel on that and planning out those negotiation process this year.
I'm just
And
suggesting we
we'll
have
make sure that we'll make sure that you have a session to learn about the contract.
I may want to be involved with that as well. It's been some time.
Okay, it would have to be sort of 2 at a time, or it would have,
Right,
yeah.
right,
Sure.
that's it.
And the other part, too, what you need to know, and if Mr. Rell were here right now, is that our evaluation system, as it currently is, does need to be looked at. But right now, it is a system that was approved, I believe, in 1985. So we are having lots of conversations about that, and I'm sure the teachers are going to be very excited
All
to
right,
be involved in that process.
May
with us.
I suggest that we have a vote to schedule a closed session meeting? This is for review of an understanding of the contract.
Sure.
7 years.
Is there a motion to do that?
He's coming to the next meeting.
I'll make a motion that we have a closed session meeting to discuss and understand the contract.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
All right. Without exception, Ms. Tamery, will you schedule that meeting?
Are you asking for a closed session or a special meeting?
A special closed session meeting to review and understand the contract.
All right, let me, I was just asking the question if this had to be a closed session.
It's regarding contract that's, if I'm mistaken, but my understanding of the Brown Act is that real estate personnel and employee contracts are always closed session meetings.
Sure.
And we're talking about having 3 board members who wanted to attend.
That's fine, yes. Okay.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, if we have a 27-year-old evaluation process, it seems that it's more than appropriate to understand within the context of how we're
I'd like
supporting
to-
our teachers, improving instruction. That
Can we get back to this agenda item, which is the curriculum?
Which is,
So I'd like to...
which, I understand, but I'm making the point that I think this is part of making sure the curriculum is delivered.
Understood.
The next point that I wanted to emphasize was the Common Core implementation, which, as you pointed out, by 2014-15, we're all going to be required to be delivering Common Core assessments to all our students. And the Common Core is a much more demanding set of content standards than our current rather demanding set of content standards. But it's a different, more critical thinking, it's more open-ended processes. Yeah. And the assessments to assess the Common Core are going to be much more critical and open-ended.
That's correct.
Require computer for computer adaptive testing. So it's a very ambitious undertaking and a very ambitious and short timeline. So I think it's even though you've got it as one of several bullets, it really is amplified in my mind as to what the district needs to be thinking about how we're going to continue doing a great job while we're also planning this.
And that's the point of the presentation tonight, is to give you a look ahead of the work that staff are going to be involved in this year on the curriculum instruction side. And Common Core is and the Common Core rollout in Emory Unified School District and Alameda County Department of Office of Education at large is something that we're directly involved in, and Ms. Allen in particular, in making sure that we have our timeline and our sequence properly aligned to 2015.
Good.
Other comments? The one other concern I have is about what we mean by STEAM.
So let me go over this first.
Yeah,
and then
that'd be good.
Okay. So the ECCL Core Program Development is another area of focus. And just to understand that this is a parallel process in terms of what we're doing right now. So it's not this is not what we're doing now currently, and it's not in the classrooms. And maybe pieces, you may see pieces of it or pieces that we hope to have, but we really haven't, at least in terms of from the staff perspective, it hasn't necessarily been defined because teachers need to have more conversation about it. So it's a parallel process. So the update currently is that last spring there were mostly all the teachers participated in I would say 3 different sessions in terms of 3 to 4 sessions in terms of ed specs work, which is different than program development work. So the ed spec work should take over a year. We didn't necessarily have the opportunity to do that, but when you have the conversations about what your programs are, then it dictates sort of what those spaces are or how the building looks. So those areas, however, the teachers have identified has been collaboration in terms of collaborating in spaces. They've talked about areas where students can collaborate, and they've also talked about areas that can be flexible in terms of before and after school, not necessarily during the day, like not team teaching or anything, but opportunities for before and after school, and that's the only areas that they've been able to address. So we'll have sessions, I believe, with the architects so there's been a team of teachers who are representing the other teachers, and we'll have sessions on Wednesdays after school to actually look at the design, give input and feedback, and then in terms of the schematic design piece, because conceptual has already been approved. In terms of the outcomes for this year, so once that's done, we're moving to the program development work, which is to develop common language, understanding, and core programs around the principles of. So full-service community schools, STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, college-going culture. I think we've talked about it, but we haven't said anything necessarily in stone. And so there's a difference of the conversation that we have now versus the conversation that we had 4 or 5 years ago, when their issue of, again, the implication of budget cuts or is something that's very real in the minds of staff members. So if we implement programs, 1, can they be sustainable? 2, what does it mean for me and my role, and are we adding other pieces or more work that's not aligned, or more work that then, is there something I have to give, but just having a conversation around it. When we talk about STEM or STEAM, before it was it was science, technology, engineering, math, which was STEM. The new acronym, and many districts have taken this on as they talk about the arts. So instead of having arts as one separate component, they added as part of science, technology, engineering, and math, because research has shown that when you have principles of art or the strategies of art, then students actually do better in terms of their academic performance. So there isn't anything necessarily set in stone, but we have to have a conversation about what does that mean. Is it sustainable? Is it something that we really want our students, what is that we want our students to be able to do or leave with entering into their post-secondary education? And is it a program, or is it a way of thinking, or is it a set of standards that we have that students will engage in, developmentally? So that's the conversations. But your question, Member Simon, was about STEAM, correct? And it was a STEM versus STEAM?
No.
Okay.
There are many ways to define a STEAM school. There's STEM with arts that are used as a vehicle for teaching STEM. There's an art school and a STEM school. There's arts as a form of STEM, focused on graphics and computer technology, and so there's many, many ways to configure a STEAM school, and right now there are a couple of extraordinary arts schools in the Bay Area. Oddly enough, there really isn't a very good STEM school anywhere in the Bay Area right now. If there is, let me know.
There's a growing STEAM center in Contra Costa.
There's lots of schools talking about it. There's lots of schools, but when you get into their curriculum and look what their actual outcomes are, The closest I can find is Oakland Tech's engineering program, which is an extraordinary engineering program and has an academy model that isn't really appropriate at our scale. So I'm trying to figure out, at our scale, with 800 kids, what do we really mean by STEAM? And the reason I'm a little urgent about this, and we can't wait a year to figure it out, is that we're designing a building that's we're going to have substantially designed in months. So I'm just sort of ringing the alarm bell a little bit here to say now is the time, and I think with the intensive conversations we're having with the teachers, to begin to define what does it mean to be an extraordinary STEM school. From my standpoint as a board member, I think it makes, we're too small to be an art school and a STEAM school, and a STEM school. That's just not possible at our scale. But it is possible to have a very, very strong STEM program with the arts as a vehicle for STEM, where the A in STEM supports all of the other STEM, where your music class is focused on the math of music, and your physics, your art class is focused on the physics, and your PE class is focused on the physics of, and your art class has the graphic arts, but it's also engineering. So
You're talking about pedagogy.
So this conversation has already started.
Right.
And so again, when I talk about these three,
very good.
I talk about the principles. So understand the expect work. To get into that much detail, that boat, I want to say, but at that time, we don't have that. We don't have the luxury of that time. So what they did is they thought about these principles and what's a space that would make it the most flexible when you actually define the details of the program. So all the ways that you've talked about delivering it, that is absolutely correct.
Right.
So what teachers have to do, since they are the ones who have to deliver, the questions are they a set of programs or classes? Can we afford those programs or classes? Is it a way of thinking, but basically based on what we have, how can we develop a common language around these principles? And at the end, once teachers develop it, are these the right set of principles for the conditions or schools that we're in? You know, or what is the take? How do we approach it? So I think these conversations have come up. STEAM versus STEM. Are there programs? How do we deliver? Are we focused on critical thinking? Does it mean that someone walks in and they need to see a series of labs? So all of that has been taken into consideration. But it's very important, I think, for where I think teachers have felt that they've sort of haven't left out, is that they haven't had the time to actually develop and to talk about it. And that started in last spring. So there are many people who love the idea, and they have the idea we can do this, but what I have them do is that not only do they think about the pedagogy of it, they think about what's the impact in terms of teaching, what's the alignment with the Common Core standards, what is it, what's the budget that we have to work with, what is it that, you know, is this something that in terms of our collaborations, what do those collaborations look like to support this type of work? So those three principles. There may be other principles that have come out of ECCL, which is then I would defer to the board to state what those are. But I think it's important for teachers to have that conversation, because when you approach them and you ask them about it and they may give you a blank stare. They hear it, but they haven't had time to actually have the conversations.
So I guess my question for you is it appropriate in the next couple of months, while we're finishing the design and having the conversations with the teachers, to bring to the board a clarification, a policy clarification of what do we mean by STEM, so that we have...
By STEAM.
I'm sorry, by STEAM, thank you. So that we have a clear board policy which we can then communicate to Berkeley City College, to the Recreation Center, and to the Child Development Center, and so that we have enough definition to be able to put it out there and saying this is where we're going.
I think a quick answer to that is I don't think they're ready yet. even having the conversations last spring, there's a lot of conversations. So you could have an elementary school person who may, and the thoughts of a high school person, they may differ. But you have to have the time to wrestle with that and what does it actually mean. Now, if as a board, you want to put a policy forth and state this is what we mean by STEAM or STEM, just understand, make sure, and that's, again, the reason I want to bring information is you have to make sure that it's sustainable, that you don't put a policy and then 2 or 3 years later you can't deliver on that promise. So
I agree. What I'm asking of staff is to work with us and let us know when and where we can do that, and to encourage sooner rather than later, to the degree that it will inform all of our work with all of our partners.
And this is all part of the timeline that was laid out in Program Director Roy Miller with the ECCL project. All of this work that Ms. Allen is involved in with staff with regard to the ed specs and the program development work are all are all being done essentially concurrently. You have to remember that we're actually tapping the same people to do these different units of work, and so right now we're running up against the ed specs work, which we're I'm trying to remember the timeline that you just showed us a few minutes ago, and then right after that we jump right into the program development work. So, and if this is what the core program work that Ms. Allen is, and the teachers are going to be involved in this year.
I just, because what I'm suggesting is it would provide less work for the teaching staff if we can provide a little more direction, so we're not looking at all 27 different ways to configure STEAM, but we're a little bit more clear about what it is we mean by STEAM and what it is we want.
So this process is one that is involving teachers, and it's very important to involve them so that they can actually give us their best thinking about the kind and the type and quality of program that we can deliver consistently for years to come. And so that's why they are directly involved in this, and I would rather take the time with them to do that and to do it properly and bring that, and definitely bring that information back to you. It doesn't mean that it is not going to happen, but it is happening on a sequence that we have planned out for this year, and it's all being lined up against the architectural sequence that we're involved in right now.
That's great. Maybe we could look at that calendar at some point.
Absolutely.
Member Dwayne?
Yeah, just a quick question, Ms. Allen, regarding the principals. And when we say college-going culture, what are we looking at? What is staff looking at when we are looking at that particular principle? We're looking K-12, we're looking high school?
We're looking K-12, but what does it look like developmentally? So if your focus, I mean, there are some schools that's their whole focus.
Right.
Their whole focus, when you look at some college prep schools, that's their whole focus.
Okay.
And so you can find those K-12, you can find them K-8, K-6, 9, 12, and what does that mean when that's your focus? So it is, and they have sometimes an emphasis on leadership. So again, thinking about those principles, also with what I think, I mean, also my goal is to also have teachers come and report so you can actually hear from them. Mm-hmm. But is it something that, is it taking on too much and you still don't have a focus, that you're still spreading yourself around, spreading yourself thin, that you can have all the focus, but is it really, is it really benefiting students, but is it really the I guess the brand of the school that you want?
Right. Okay.
You know, so sometimes you have a brand of a school and you have a school and they have several academies within it. So that's their focus. Their focus is a school of academies.
Right.
You have some our size, you know, is the focus going to be STEAM or STEM? Right. Will the focus be a full-service community school? Will the focus be college-going culture? Oh. Can you do all three and have that as a focus? Okay, or is it, you know, and so really it's the and these are the conversations that have started. Okay. It's like, well, can we have a focus here? Or does it mean that you can have, I think back to Member Simon, you see people with the literature, but when you actually look at the programs, it's very shallow, and the kids really aren't doing anything with anyone or anybody because you have so much on your plate that you're not really I would say
targeting or focusing in on.
There's a focus, but you're not investing. You're really not invested in any area.
So what staff is really looking at is which one of these principles you have up here, which one of these principles should the district really focus in on?
I mean, these are all the ones that have come up for ECCL.
Okay,
so if there are others that have come up, then please tell me so we can have a conversation about that.
Well, you said something under college-going culture that I wanted to say, but I didn't want to get into a murky conversation. But when you said leadership, you know, could be attached to the college-going culture, the program I was thinking about was the civic leadership, civic government, you know, for our students. So, you know, I'm going to assume, since you said that college-going culture could also, you know, include some type of leadership, when you look at that principle, that civic engagement, civic learning would be within that principle.
Yeah, because I think as we were talking, that's a trigger.
Right.
I believe there were a few years ago when the board actually did it on the retreat, and you all talked about service learning and having that as an important component. We've also talked about, I mean, that's why we had the 7 periods with the leadership component, and you all adopted those graduation requirements.
Right.
So that was another piece of ECCL thinking about, or was another principle of how is it more of like, when we look at the schools as like a leadership academy or a college prep school.
Got you. Okay, Member Simon, thank you for bringing this up and brought a new light of understanding to what this really is saying.
Yeah, and one of the things that I just want to echo the point that Ms. Allen is making. A college-going culture is a mindset. And we have an A to G policy, and we are expecting all of our students who come through our schools to graduate from high school ready to be accepted to and actually complete college. So it gets back to the rigor question, it gets back to the high expectations for all students, and also programmatically in terms of core services that we're offering grades kindergarten through 12th grade that actually align to that ultimate vision of the new college graduate, high school graduate, which is ultimately a 2- or 4-year certification program graduate that has successfully completed our A to G board policy requirements. So, and the program elements that are attached to that, whether it's our academic affairs, academic work in terms of completing the courses, with looking at our dashboard, with 3.0 or higher, whether it's our looking at our college exposures and the kinds of activities that when kids start thinking about college in kindergarten and what that means and what that looks like all the way through to 12th grade. And then also what are the programmatic pieces in terms of student life, leadership, service that actually groom the college applicant that can actually, on their application to college, be accepted because of the expectations that we've laid out and that they have successfully completed.
Got you.
Yeah, and to add to that is you can pass A through G courses. Kids do it all the time. But does it mean that they'll remain in college for all 4 years or 5 years? That's very different than actually having. So you see this in mostly your college prep and your independent schools. The emphasis on college, you start seminars in the 9th grade, college seminars. So again, that's a different budget implication, because if you're adding that as a course or a class, or if you're looking at a different structure, you have to be mindful of what that looks like. So again, those conversations happen. The middle college model is very different than just, we have a few activities and the students are passing their A through G requirements. Again, what tools are we giving them so they can actually be successful in college?
Right. No, I'm with you. I got it.
Member Afro, did you have additional? No. Just a small question. I don't see the International Baccalaureate program that you've discussed with us. Are we dropping that?
No, I can see.
We'll add
I
that.
assume that was part of the
College
college.
No, that's separate, because that'll be separate. It will be separate, a separate conversation. So again, anything that's very specific that you have to develop a lot, it's very different. You walk into a school that has an IB program, it's not just here's a class. The whole school, there's a program that's part of it. And so is it K-12? Is it not? Do you emphasize it 9-12? Do you emphasize 7-8? And so those are the conversations that teachers have to have, and it's not necessarily because you want them to tease out each piece. Again, going back to Member Simon, if you don't tease them out, then you will have a bunch of something going on, but it's not developed well.
exactly.
The IB piece is one that we have been looking at, to your point, to address the fluency, the second language fluency goal that the board has set. But it is something that, to Ms. Allen's point, does have programmatic pieces to it that we have to fully flesh out.
Well, and to Ms. Allen's point, I'm concerned that we not try to do so many things that we do them poorly. So what I'm getting at is, at what point does staff come back to us and say, you know, those 7 things you wanted us to do, and a number of years ago we had 7 pillars that we were trying to pass, you only have the budget and time to do 4 of them or 5 of them, and at what point will we have the discussion? And my question to you is, at what point do we have the community discussion about what 4 of the 7 things we can afford to do? And you know, if we passed a parcel tax, we could do 5. But
yeah, I think the conversation first start. I think sometimes we've gone where we have the ideas and then we place it on to staff or teachers, and I'm going to separate the teachers versus, you know, district staff and what our role is. Teachers need to talk about the programs to see if this is something they can fully implement. If they don't understand what it is, they're not going to implement it. And so you can have it, and so what it ends up happening is that it'll be another district initiative, another pilot, and the next year's another pilot. And you won't have anything that's done well. So they will actually bring up those questions. Like, is it too many? This is what we think we can focus on. This is where we see the developmental, you know, process. This is where we think in terms of, you know, when you know, if Mark, then as a district, then Mark would come in and talk and really talk about what the budget is, what's the budget implications, where can you shift money to, because then they start to think about, okay, can we afford it or can't we? Or how can we do it differently based on the budget that we actually have? So that's, and then the other resources, where whether it's myself or another person, or if it's, you know, Ms. Nichols in terms of technology, this is the state that we're in, this is what we possibly can do, because it gives them information to have these conversations.
And I love that. I mean, I'm excited to hear what the teachers think that we can do as a district based on, you know, their experience, knowledge of students, and yada, yada, yada. And then come back and give that advice to the board.
well, my concern is that if we don't set priorities as to what's the most important, what we might find ourselves doing is we can only afford, you know, our 4 least important of the 7. So, for example, from my point of view, I think the highest leverage, highest return thing that we can do is to be an extraordinary STEM school. STEAM would be nice, but I think if we could be an extraordinary STEM school, that would be a huge thing. And in a region where we're surrounded by schools that are getting more, particularly if we're going to continue to have a high school, if we're surrounded by schools that are specializing and getting very good at doing things, it's
so with this being a hot topic, and this is one of the areas that we talked about, I think in order for you to prioritize, you have to be well informed.
Right.
So
exactly.
The issue would be, is it's not that the teacher said this is what we think we can do, but it brings information to you so you can make an informed decision, so you can prioritize. So when they've done the work, because it's hard to do it here, if they've done the work where those of us who are a district give them the information, they can give them the space, the opportunity to have the conversation, they can come back and give you information. So therefore, the more information you have, actually, it informs you, just like data does a teacher. You get to have the data informs the instruction. The data that you receive will inform your direction, and not just we're guessing and we're thinking and we hope, and then I talk to one teacher or 2 teachers, but really this is the process that we've gone through. So then people can back and state, yes, we've had that conversation, and we know that it may not be our final decision, it's the board's final decision, but we've given, you know, as much information as possible to you.
Because I can see with that information, I mean, for all intents and purposes, staff may come back, Member Simon, and say, well, based on this data, STEM may not be a good program for us to implement right now, based on, you know, all these different little elements. then that means, okay, the board needs to take that. We can still say, well, this is what we want based on all the partners that we have in our community that could, that could possibly maybe help, get us there. But at the same time, teachers may say, this college-going culture principle may be the best for our students, and the way we go right now.
Right now, today, we have one policy that is aligned to certainty that we know we have to build something around, yes, and that is the college-going culture. Mm-hmm. Everything else could wind up being thematic hooks or strategies to get to that. But today, we have an A to G for all policy. Mm-hmm. We have a unit requirement that every student, and a language fluency requirement, mm-hmm, that every student has to achieve. Mm-hmm. So as a core program development conversation, right, that staff will be involved in, we have to ask ourselves, what's going to be the path to achieve that? And that's the work that the teachers will be involved in having the discussions.
And again, you can do that through any of these programs. So the emphasis, I think, will be also, in thinking about what Dr. Lindell stated, is look at what policies you have. So are there policies that support the work that you want to do? Or how does the graduation requirements support any of this work? What's the path that you want to take to get to those end results, those graduation requirements, or those goals that you have? I think it was like maybe 7 goals or 6 goals that you want students to be able to do or experience by the end of 12th grade.
This has been a very helpful discussion. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the work you've put into this.
I did actually have a comment on this strand.
Okay.
Which is that I read the college-going culture to be sort of a placeholder for the broader conversation, and I'm thinking of the NCUST suggestions, which were you need to do something unique to really, make this high school function and be attractive to folks. Some sort of, and as I recall, there were 3 pieces to it. You could do a college-going,
early college model.
An early college model. IB was one. An academy was one. So if we're not on the same page there, then I guess...
So what I'm talking about is...
So I understood this to be, we're not... But I have heard us talk about IB. I saw it in the NCUST. That's one thing. There could be other ways to do it.
That's his... And those are recommendations from one source. So those are recommendations from one source, which we will address. But I think it's very important for teachers to address it. We throw a lot of stuff out there. So we have a person who throws out IB. They throw out something else. What they've heard was STEM or MISTY, for years. So it's really important for teachers to identify this. College-going culture, again, can be a mindset, but it also can be a type of program. So some independent schools, when you look at independent schools, some of those leadership prep academies, that's what they live and breathe. That's it, completely point blank, in terms of how they teach students to learn how to write. It's minus of the middle college, because you don't have the students are not necessarily going to attending college course in 11th and 12th grade, but what they provide on their campus is almost like going to college. And I do that because I compare myself to, I went to public school, my husband went to a private, University High private school, my brother went to a private high school, and when we compare the rigor or the curriculum or the pathways, his school was a university high school. That whole school was about, you're going to a university. And there wasn't any other type of hook. I won't say hook, but there wasn't necessarily another pathway. That was it. As soon as they hit 9th grade, that was it. So when I state that, I do mean it may come back that it's an umbrella. It may come back that, okay, teachers are thinking about this is what we specifically want. And they do take into consideration what Dr. Johnson has stated. But what I want teachers to also engage in is everything they've heard about ECCL for over the past 10 years or 9 years, and make meaning of it, and to give you all feedback so you can make an informed decision.
I think Dr. Johnson's comments were also associated with essentially capturing market share, so in addition to increasing enrollment and to what Trustee Simon was talking about, the kinds of the kinds of themes that might generate interest in a small school. So those were the recommendations or suggestions that he was providing us, and we're looking at all of those.
Again, I'm going to have to draw this conversation to a close. There's a lot more, but we're scheduled. We have 2 more items to finish in the next 15 minutes, so we're going to have to stay on the published schedule. I do believe you have a little bit more left in your presentation, and I'd like to give you time to finish.
The next piece is just talking about the curriculum committee. So currently, again, there's Member Alfeld and Member Dice who are on the curriculum committee in terms of board members. And so the purpose and goals are basically the goals that what I shared with them is what I shared with you tonight. However, being mindful in terms of the other 3 board members, how can you use your current members that are part of that committee to actually address or bring some of those needs? We won't always have an opportunity here unless you want this just to be the only topic of the night to have a discussion, but you have representation that can provide that, for you. So it's just thinking about information presented. How do you want them to, what's the possible way for them to come back and bring information? How can you give information to them so they can have a deeper discussion or a more thorough discussion about it? That's the curriculum committee.
And
then questions, comments, next steps.
Well, let me ask that question. Questions, comments, or next steps?
No, I mean, from what I understand is that,
please use the mic.
that you're asking that the teachers have the conversation so that they own the work.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And make recommendations, and that all of the work that they're doing in those conversations are all in line with Roy and his team. That's what I've heard.
That is, yes, that is in line with it's in line with the ECCO work. But currently, the ed spec work in terms of the architects, that's one piece is we're addressing right now. And then to add the details to the program development work will be that parallel line, trying to blend what we already do, in terms of what type of school we'll have in 3 years.
It's not a little work.
It's not a little work at all.
I appreciate it, though.
I'm going to try.
Raphael?
No further
Lynn? Okay.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you very much. In terms of next steps, I think it would be helpful if you could send out the schedule for this work so we have a sense of when the return times are. I think it is important for us to put on the schedule when the staff's recommendations for the program areas are going to come back and when the board is going to look at it in terms of our priorities going forward. I'd like to also remind the board that we passed 2-year goals a year and a quarter ago, and we're coming up on the time to set our goals for the next 2 years, and it would be great if this work came in time to inform that discussion.
We can, certainly bring that back. We actually set, in terms of the dashboard of indicators, class of 2014 goals is what we showed on the dashboard, and that was 3 years, not 2. So just for that clarification.
I think given ECCL, we might want to reset the goals. We might want to revisit that a little earlier. We also, at that time, set 2 goals and said that 3 would be appropriate. So I do think it would be helpful to look at how that all fits together. Let's move on.
So this is just item number 7.
Textbook update and review.
Yes, and this is, Ms. Allen is here to give you an overview of the textbook information on the list of and the courses that we offer and the materials that we use. Ms. Allen?
Okay, yes, so this is just, again, update. The main thing is just to have board feedback in terms of when we get to the SWOT analysis and questions or wonderings that you may have, or even, again, feedback or suggestions. This is different from the textbook sufficiency that will be presented at the next board meeting, but if there are questions that are coming up that that's not addressed here, then I'll have another opportunity to do that during the textbook sufficiency presentation. So currently, I provided you all a list with just current textbooks that we use. At this time, I know sometimes there have been questions in terms of what do we actually use. So these are the books that we use. It's the middle and high school textbook 7 through 12, and it's listed that way because we've had 7 through 12 grade level, and sometimes the 6th grade. I think maybe social studies and the reading are the same as 7 through 12, but not the mathematics. So it just gives you an idea of what courses are happening currently, what's the textbook titles, and publishers, if you're ever interested in looking them up online to get more information. Are there any questions particularly about that?
Can you flash to me?
The list?
Yeah.
Oh, no, the list is too small for me to put on the PowerPoint, so that was one of the documentations I uploaded. Okay. But again, so that's what the list represents. So sorry, I just felt it was too small.
No, okay.
So the next piece briefly is just to look at a SWOT analysis in terms of our process and procedure. I mean, I think we have a simple process, simple procedure, but it's very complicated in terms of actually sometimes acquiring books, delivering books, make sure we have the right books, students have the correct books. And this came up because when we do our sufficiency and we do the Williams, there has been, when we've had the teams come in, I've asked them questions about how do other districts solve their problems with textbooks. The two answers that I were given was that they order their children 2 sets of textbooks, one stays at home, one stays at the school, or that they have just a warehouse of extra books. 2 options that we don't have the luxury of actually addressing because we can't afford that. So with this process, it allows us to think about, well, what's the process, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and I want to go to threats, I think, first, and then we'll have the conversation about what opportunities do we have to actually strengthen our process. So the first thing is that at the end of the year, we gather a list of books from teachers, textbooks that are needed or textbooks that are wanted in June. With the teams who loop, they switch their books in terms of if they're going back down to a grade where they're not taking their class to the next level, then they switch books with their counterpart. Counterpart in terms of their colleague. We order books in July once the budget is released, and at that same time we collect books from particularly the high school students that have they either haven't turned them in, and they usually return them in the district office. Sometimes we find them in the locker. Sometimes they come into the school. It's in the drop box in the library, etc. Then we wait for the books to be delivered. That usually happens sometimes in August, and then we'll order more textbooks based on enrollment. However, while we believe that can be simple, but it isn't always, I think it's the enforcement of the process and the policies where some of our struggles happen. So in terms of what we've identified in terms of strengths, we do have a process. So we have TextLink that previously the librarian at the secondary school, she did all the textbooks. And so when I shadowed her this past year, the year before, I realized why it took her so long. It was too much for one person. She didn't have the time, one person to actually, to track, I guess, using TextLink to track all the, to wait until the enrollment comes in. Then she has to track the students. Then she has to have the students come in by class. It was too much. It was too much for one person to do that. And although it was a good idea years ago to state that's where the books would be housed, it didn't necessarily work. And at the elementary school was basically based on the teacher. So I think what we've tried to do is attach a TextLink, particularly 9 through 12. Well, actually 7 through 12th grade books have a barcode that you can track. TextLink, and teachers would be trained, and some of the high school teachers have been trained, and others have to be trained if they're new or if they're new to the middle school. Ms. Quadier and Ms. Colon have been the 2 primary people who've been those liaisons to collect the list from teachers and to try to remind them, that book, count your books, see how many you may need so they can actually place orders. So they've been the 2 primary people who've placed the orders at both the elementary and the high school. I think there has been more of an awareness to ask students, or at least by the office staffs, to actually try to implement the policy in terms of, holding report cards or holding transcripts if students don't return their books and getting letters out to parents when books are due. So I think those are areas that have either been consistent or we've noticed that's an area that needs to be tightened up. I think one of the weaknesses, or I would say challenges, is that whole process that I'm working with, I'll be working with Mr. Bonet, is that process where the approval process, how do you fax the companies? Sometimes you fax a PO and the company doesn't receive it. So if you don't follow up and follow up and follow up and follow up, larger orders, and particularly Ms. Quadir has actually, over the past 2 years, tried to capture what are some of those nuances. So there are times when you actually place a large order, they don't even receive your order until you have to call and follow up, or they'll get back to you in 2 or 3 days. So I think that process in terms of when we actually create the PO, how it gets to the company, and how to follow up has been issues. If the fax, there have been few years where the fax machines haven't worked, so she's working on a process where we can actually do an email transmission and have a specific contact. So some of those pieces have, I think, are very challenging. And then some of the threats have been lost books, students lose books, to try to get them to return it, although we try to implement the policy. If you have students who leave, particularly if they're students who are transient students or mobile who don't necessarily live in the district, there are ways that they can actually enroll in another school, and the school have already accepted them, and so we can't hold transcripts or anything else because they've already enrolled in the school. And then, the issue of stolen, books who are students who may steal books because they don't want to get in trouble, that their original book is lost, or just leaving the books at home and never finding them. So those are some. There are probably a whole lot, but again, just to engage the board in the conversation so it has budget and policy implications. So now we're here at opportunities, and this is where we would have the conversation in terms of what are some of those opportunities that we can utilize or implement to make sure that we have a more streamlined process, an efficient process. So it's open for discussion. Do you have anything to say?
Well, I know you know, but for the folks at home who might be watching, I was the lead counsel on the Williams case that, among other things, established the shocking law that every kid in the state gets their own book to use in class and take home. There wasn't any such law in California before, and when we investigated and got Lou Harris, the famous pollster, to actually do a survey of scientific survey of the state's teachers, he determined that 11% of the teachers in the state reported they did not have enough books in class for every kid to have their own that they were sharing. 30% reported that they didn't have enough for every kid to take a book home at night for homework. And so the state fell down on, well, we know it's falling down on funding, but it certainly is falling down on making sure that every kid has their own book or instructional material. It doesn't have to be a book. So I'm quite familiar with the issues that you're talking about. The law, well, let me say that having established the law and county oversight now and sanctions at the state from the superintendent if things don't get fixed quickly, we actually then have heard back from districts. Thank you for doing this, because now we are much more conscious about having policies and procedures in place and making sure this stuff happens when it needs to happen, and it should be happening before school starts, so that the books are there when kids start. And of course, they're going to be, the student who moves, like the new student I met on Friday that comes in the middle. Yeah, they're going to have to make adjustments around the edges. But so I appreciate you're taking a hard look at this and trying to make sure that we're doing this right in Emeryville. The law does not require that there be double sets.
Thank goodness.
A set for home and a set for class. No, it doesn't require that. But it does require that, you know, we figure out well enough in advance how many books we need, and we get them ordered, and that, you know, we have the systems in place to make sure that on day one, every student who's coming has a book. And if I don't know enough about the system to know, well, you know, can't we order 5 extra or a few extra and ship them back? Is this super expensive? Or that seems like a better way to go than trying to hit it right on the nose and then scrambling when you know, enrollment is more than we thought. Yeah, I certainly think having each teacher be able to say, here's my needs, you know, and figure that out within the first few days of school is a much better system than have one librarian try to go around and figure out what's going on in the universe.
Do you have a specific suggestion for solving the issue?
Or just other opportunities that, so one that I know myself and Ms. Quadier, Ms. Cologne, and Ms. Latham have talked about is just doing some quarterly book checks. So instead of, sometimes the teachers do their book checks, but if we go in and actually do some of the book checks, it'll give us an opportunity to see is there a certain subject, certain class, certain cohort that loses books on a, you know, on a consistent basis. So that was one possible, but I just, again, wanted to, and I think according, and also we want to replace immediately, but at the same time uphold the policy, and I think I've included those policies in terms of still, because you can actually require parents to pay, or you can hold transcripts and you can hold report cards until a book is paid for.
And I think there's other sort of end-of-year party kind of things, but I want to make sure we've heard your comments first.
One of my suggestions is to buy more than the precise number that we think we need, and work out the negotiation with the companies that we can send this stuff back, you know, at the end of in mid-October or end of October, whenever it is, we figure out we know more or less.
So basically, to order because we order a few more, but to order actually a significant amount more and see if we can return those books.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
Another is, I don't know whether we can, if the issue is that July is too late, we have to order because we're waiting for the budget to be approved and to figure out the state, have they passed the budget, and does this textbook ordering have to turn on that? Well, we know we're going to have a budget at some point. We know we've got some reserves. I don't think it's going to break our bank if we borrow from our reserves for 2 months to buy the textbooks. I don't know if this is an issue, but if we're ordering in May instead of July, is that going to help us?
Well, that's, I mean, that's a good one that I would have to speak with Mr. Bonet, Mr. Bonet, to see if that's something that we could possibly do.
Yeah. So then, and then thirdly, it is to construct the systems, which it sounds like you're headed that way at the high school, and maybe you're doing it, I guess you said you're doing it at the elementary, each teacher and Ms. Cologne collects it, but to have a quick feedback system within the first few days where each teacher says, you know, I know what I don't have no books. Here they are. I need 3. I need 2. And sometimes they're sitting in the class next door because they got 2 extra.
Yes, or some haven't reported that, or they reported when they need it, you know, or when they're about to use it.
You got to ask that question too.
So then it comes up as panic, but I do appreciate that, because I think that was another area that we've noticed, that some people don't ask for it until they actually need it, so they don't pay attention necessarily. But it's really to do a complete inventory, or is there a quick, what's the quick feedback, you know, in terms of if you don't have the books, and to state it before you actually, you know, use them. Because a lot of books have a lot of consumables, or they have books where you have your core book, but when you don't use your supplemental book until maybe, you know, a month later, or your reference book until, you know, 2 or 3 days, you know, I mean 2 or 3 weeks later, because that's the sequence that it happens in the curriculum. But I think that's one we've talked about as well.
Yeah. So yeah, you need to ask the teachers not just, are you missing any, but how many extra do you have, because someone else might need that. And lastly, The Williams legislation also required us to post in every classroom and make available, post the fact that you can, an individual student can file a complaint, or a parent, that they don't have enough books. And we were not posting. And Alameda County recently reminded us of that fact, and now we are again.
So I think staff can also do the same thing, right?
Any person or organization, yes, including staff, a teacher. So
and we have that.
You know, and what I'm suggesting is a system that doesn't get us to the level of a Williams complaint, but it just has a formalized but also there might be, a staff wants to file an actual complaint, say this is a Williams thing, but also a parent or a student. I mean, at the end of the day, a 6th grader might say, Mom, I don't have a math test or a book, and then the parent should know that they can file that, and that we're required to remedy immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Member Kent? Member Gwynn? One question. Is it possible to get electronic versions of these books?
It is possible. I mean, so that I know. Yeah, we've been in that conversation. This has been that conversation. So I think, in terms of looking at what are the next steps. So, if there's a book, is there availability? But I think we've waited on some of it because of the Common Core. So a lot of the textbooks are shifting to the Common Core aspect, and they actually have electronic versions, or they have parts or pieces that are electronic.
I bring it up particularly because the price of the handhelds is now about to drop to about $250, and quite frankly, these books are $80 to $120 a piece.
That is correct.
So when you're talking 3 different books, it's actually cheaper to just buy the licenses and then keep replacing the iPads when they get lost, because an iPad will be a lot cheaper than replacing 2 or 3 books at a time.
So I know as we move into the iPad pilot, I know that's something that we're continuously investigating, and doing that with some of the publishing companies who provide that.
Right.
And the publishing companies are actually scrambling to figure all of this out, because you're absolutely right. And it's also easier to update with the download rather than buy brand new textbooks.
Right, because we still have the license.
When the president changes or other information changes, it's easier to add those pages.
Right, so it's just a lot cheaper in the end.
Expensive.
Because it seems like the issue is lost book. The issue isn't buying them or they wear out. The issue is kids leave town with them, or they're left somewhere.
So that's
and so related to that, just one last thought is it would be great to do like an end of year. We have so much to celebrate here. Let's turn it into a celebration. It'll save money. Let's have a party at the end of the year. Let's have a book return party.
not a book burning party.
Not a book burning party. A book return party. But turn it into a celebration of the great work. Maybe some assignments could be burned, but burn your worst grade. But I think that there has to be a way to make doing the right thing fun. And if there's ways that we can sort of build it in at the end of the year, because my understanding is the problem is the books dribble in. Give an iPad away to the kid who have a raffle of all the people who return the kids, and give some movie tickets away, or
So you're talking about essentially about an incentives program for turning books in on time,
but not just an incentive, something that's fun.
Yeah, and we're also talking about how to instill personal responsibility, in students as well. So it is a tricky balance, but these are things to consider in terms of
it's just an idea.
Making incentives fun to do the right thing.
If there's no other comments, should we move on?
Just on the electronic book point, I think not all books, the current content standard books, are available electronically, and I think publishers have frankly been a little slow to move that way for exactly the reasons you're saying. it's cheaper, and they make a lot of money off of the hardbound books.
Having said that, we have the opportunity to switch to those publishing companies who are going there, and I think as the ones who are slow see their customers going away, they'll speed up.
Yeah, and on our end, the requirement is only that if we're switching that way, then it's still incumbent on the district to make sure every kid has their own iPad or a handheld or whatever it is to use in class and take home.
Right. Well, and luckily we've been experimenting with that for a couple of years, so I think we're ahead of the curve. But I think that is the way things are going. When the price of these handhelds gets down to $100, you know, it just makes sense. It's harder to lose the cloud than it is to lose a book. Shall we move on?
So, just briefly, the funds that are spent on textbooks, sorry that I duplicated that, but basically they have been spent on yearly materials, which are your consumables. So particularly at the elementary site, there's Open Court, and so does Everyday Math. They have a lot of, and so does Social Studies. There are a lot of consumables that you have to buy yearly in order to make up your core program. So also there's the replacement textbooks, and there's the new materials. And our budget has been was allocated $59,483. So far we've spent $49,596. That's approximate estimation. So just so you know that with the consumables, replacement textbooks, and new materials could be something like, you know, music or some of our class set novels, but it's not necessarily a lot. Most of our funds are spent on the consumables and on our replacement textbooks. And this year we've had to buy several teacher editions because of the several new teachers at Emery Secondary.
You said something that just bing. So how are we doing with students and instruments and music?
That is something that I'm working with Mr. Bonet again, but we really need to address musical instruments. So that's an ongoing cost that we've tried to, you know, where parents can help support, or if they can afford it, they'll rent the instrument, and we've purchased some. So working with current music teachers and even music teachers, you know, in the past, that has been one where we really have to identify a budget to support musical instruments. And we've just been blessed in a few years that we've had Ms. Kravchik, who's given us donations to actually do that. Right. So I know you all remember that.
Yeah, you're right. Now that you mentioned, yeah, come back to us with that budget for the music instruments, if it, you know.
Yeah, and if it's not, again, it gives you information.
Right.
So as you all make budget decisions, then you know that's an area where it's really needed.
Because that's a great concern now that you mentioned that, you know, allowing our students to have the proper instruments to really gain, you know, that experience and that expertise in music. So
okay, let's keep it moving here.
So the next one, just the textbook policy. I won't review the policy, but what I included in the board packet is just information that has to do with textbook policy in terms of instruction. So in the board policy, there are two areas that deal with textbook: community relations, which is more of your Williams review, and then you also have the one that's instruction. So what I'm bringing forward is the one or the policies that's related directly to instruction. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be changed or anything, but you have it as a reference. So as we have conversations about instructional program, we have conversations about K-12 alignment, is there anything in terms of policy and budget? So when I bring forth things is so you all can have information to make decisions on those two areas, budget and policy. Sometimes policy, it may not be something that you do this year, but it may be something that you want to do next year, but at least you all are, you know, mindful of it. Great. So I provided that for you all. And then textbook and curriculum adoptions, those I've ordered the ones that are needed in order. So English Language Arts 6 through 12, we have a very old version of our English book from Princess Hall, and they actually have a newer version. I mean, and I know that we're looking at when we look at textbooks or receive those presentations, we're looking at, do they offer Common Core? Are they addressing Common Core? And two, what are the electronic or versions of it, or what are the technology pieces that are included? And do they include an ELD or EL component? And do they offer components for differentiated instruction, special ed students, you know, et cetera? So try to get more bang for our buck. Two, Spanish, 9 through 12, very outdated and is in desperate need to of an adoption. 3 social studies, 6 through 12. 4 independent studies, so if this is something that we're truly going to try to implement, which is another, when we talk about a program to attract students. So Mr. Patterson has last year, and I don't know if he'll have the time this year because he's, acquired some new roles, but last year he went and he studied different independent study programs, because in those cases you actually can attract more students who, particularly those who may want to do homeschool, but they really want a little different, maybe a level towards going to school, but they do independent study versus, the homeschool. So that's another implication in terms of materials. And then transition kindergarten, although we have approximately maybe just 10 students who are transition kindergarten, we still want to be mindful of if we need to adopt any materials to address any of our early fives, particularly since the age requirement is going to shift again next year, and then it'll shift, until September. And then class sets of novels for English and social studies. So I believe, and I don't think it has happened, that the board has not adopted not a list of like novels that students should use K through 12. So that's something else that's on the horizon.
Are you going to publish a schedule of when we should be doing adoptions?
Yes, so we can go through, what we can do is we can go through what that, what that process looks like, and what are some of the first areas, and can we, again, budget implications, so we have to create, what's the cost of each one of these? When
you come back for your next quarterly report, could you provide a recommended schedule so that we know? I would rather that, I think it makes more sense for our decisions to be based on what is academically needed, and then it's up to the board to figure out how to pay for it, than seeing how little money is the state leaving us this year, and how badly should our students suffer because of it. I understand that it may require us to do some significant fundraising, but we should know what adoptions are needed because our kids don't have the right books.
So that leads into
particularly if we're looking at an international baccalaureate program.
That is correct.
Yeah. We have to step it up, and I think the teachers also need to know, how they should start thinking in advance, so this doesn't sneak up on us.
They've heard the NCUS report and know what the priority recommendations are as well.
Right, but I think schedules help to know when the recommended schedule is, and then we'll manage to that.
Good idea.
Any other? I guess this is the time for questions, and I'm going to start in this direction this time.
If there's any more.
Member Dwayne?
I have none.
Great. I'll say great.
I think I've addressed my...
Okay, thank you. Or do you have any?
This has been very helpful, Ms. Allen. I really appreciate this sort of heads up, and I really appreciate that it's going to be a quarterly conversation, because it gives us a chance to get a sense of what we need to do in terms of our upcoming budget and to plan ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next item is the contract for payroll services, number 8.
Yes. Our CBO, Mark Brunet, is here to discuss with you approval of the contract for the Alameda County Office of Ed to continue processing and our payroll until such time that we can have our staff trained to be able to do so. Mr. Brunet?
In prior years, the County Office of Ed has provided payroll services to the district. This last year, Emeryville took it back, and with the departure of the person who was doing the payroll, we contracted back with the county this last year for a limited time. However, we're now assessing the capabilities of our current staff, our new staff. And during this time period and a training period, we want to extend the contract of payroll services with the county until the end of June. Hopefully we can get our people trained and up to speed with doing the payroll in the county system before the end of the year. But this covers us up until June.
Any questions, Member Nguyen?
Not at all.
Questions, Member Affelt?
So this is for a period that's already started, July 1, is that right?
Yes,
Through June 30th,
that's correct.
okay. So taking Member Nguyen's earlier point, I mean, is this probably should be something that we typically would try to bring to us ahead of time, or
Well, this
figured
goes to
this
the end
out.
of this goes to the end of the year from current. Initially, they came in and did a
We had a small contract.
smaller
last year.
contract.
This is a continuation of it.
That's right. So
I guess like I'm just suggesting, even though I wasn't on the board at the time, that we should be entering into contracts before the work.
Well,
Did.
there was.
There was a smaller contract
Okay.
We did.
initially, and now this is extending
Is this
it.
an amendment? Because I read this as an agreement that says it's
This is a new
entered
agreement.
into the 20th day of
It's a
August.
subsequent agreement, as I understand it.
The original agreement was for a few months that did not reach the $15,000 limit to bring to the board. But with the change in the business office,
I understand the reason. I guess
Yeah.
I was wondering if the language should reflect whatever the end period of that contract was and go, you know, we don't want to be double contracted legally for two different
right.
obligations at the same time. So
Well, the initial
that
con-
ended August 30th, and it should say September 1, right?
Okay.
But I'll leave that to you guys to figure that out.
Member Kent?
My questions are answered already.
And I believe this is a first reading, so this just goes on to the, is there an urgency in this one? Or is it covered by the current contract?
The county would like to see an urgency in this. It's fine with me if it
It goes on consent next.
goes to consent next board meeting.
All right, if it's fine with staff, then we'll move on. Board reports, are there any board reports?
I have one. The last ECDC Advisory Committee, there were a few recommendations and questions, realizing that there has been a lot of changes at ECDC within the past few years. And with the new changes, you know, I believe that staff just kind of wants to strengthen and continue the communication between the two agencies. And some of these recommendations and questions, I know the district has performed and served in past, as well as even in the present currently. But I think because of the changes, not only with staff there, but me being on the advisory committee, there was just, you know, some questions that they would like to, you know, like I said, strengthen the relationship with the board, well, with the district and the ECDC program. And if some of these things are being done, what we may want to do is to possibly have staff on our side of the district probably, you know, re-engage the communication with the ECDC and their new
So should we
management.
agendize this and maybe
Well-
have their new management come?
Well, I don't think we need
we'll
to
discuss it?
I don't think we need to agendize it. I mean, I think it would be a good idea to, you know, invite the ECDC new administrator to the board, as well as what I was also thinking, maybe also have some of our staff go to some of these ECDC advisory committees to kind of update and illuminate on some of the things that we are doing at the district with ECDC that some of the individuals on the committee are not familiar with. So it's just three. One of them would be a recommended policy that the students that graduate from ECDC has a first priority registration into our district. I know in the past that has been, we have done that, but whether it be a policy, we may want to look at that. Second thing would be, would it be possible to have a one-page fact sheet explaining who was able to enroll into the district to ECDC parents? So, for example, there was one individual on the committee who didn't really realize that she could have an inter-district transfer of her child in not the neighboring city, but the city next to her neighboring city. She has just thought that she can only have an inter-district transfer with the city that she lived next to, not a city that may be 2 or 3 cities over from where she lives. So it's just educating parents. And the third and final would be, could the district give an orientation presentation to parents at ECDC who have children graduating from the program?
Which we do now, and that's an annual event.
Right.
Yeah.
So, the fact that we do that, we just may, want to inform the committee when those dates happen.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of communication.
Well, that's what it is.
And it's something that we certainly do the work, so we just have to, it might be helpful to...
Yeah, better communication. And like I said, just bringing, both of the agencies back into communication with one another, seeing that all the changes that have been taking place already at ECDC.
Very good.
So I really feel as a being on the committee as a liaison, I will probably bring, other concerns and questions, and we can address those as need be.
Thank you for your report. Other board reports? Nope.
I have one. The Communications Committee met again today, and a good part of the meeting was going over the draft superintendent's communication plan, which will be presented to the board sometime in November, one of the November board meetings. We need another meeting to go over it. The superintendent acknowledged, however, that the plane is being flown while it's being built, and she's undertaking communication activities even as she's drafting up a plan more formally. Among the items that you'll see in the draft communication plan do include some two-way listening input sessions, for example, around the ECCL, around the budgeting process. So I think those are in response to feedback we've had from the public here at our board meetings and outside our board meetings. Also, Mr. Bonet will be undertaking, as part of communications work, sort of an understanding the budget process, budget planning process, and those activities are something we can all look forward to. The district staff have already met with the ETA representatives and invited them to forward volunteers to participate on a budget advisory committee, and hopefully those folks will be soon identified, and meetings on the budget are planned in the next few weeks as part of monthly staff meetings to start that conversation there as well. We also have included in this draft planning sort of the regular newsletters from the principals of the secondary school and the elementary school as part of the communications process, and so we hope to fold that into the communications plan as well. And I think we're all concerned that sort of this, fast developing and changing information about the ECCL in particular is something that needs to be communicated with in the principals' communications to their communities, and in the superintendent's quarterly communications to the communities, which are going to be in Wednesday or Thursday packets, depending on your school site, and posted on the board website as well. So that was about the extent of the conversation. I don't know, Superintendent, if you have anything to add.
No, I think you, excuse me, I think you just about covered everything. We reviewed the communication plan, and we also, the one item that we that you did not go over was reviewing the district communication data infrastructure, and we're in the process of looking at all of our internal data structures and how they essentially roll up, and we've established an internal data committee to take a look at that. So everything from school loop usage and ARIES and data director, all of the other systems that we use, or data systems that we use, and we're looking at a set of identifying a set of measurable indicators that we can actually hold ourselves accountable for in terms of communication success. So those are that was the other item that we talked about briefly, but our meeting got cut short because it was 6 o'clock and time to come here.
One additional report?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add to the report when we talked about explaining who could enroll into the district. It was all, and I think there was also a question and concern about could employees that work in Emeryville, could they enroll their children into our district as well? So, like I said, that question was, basically explaining who's all eligible for.
So they want to know the changes in the Allen
right,
bill.
the Allen bill and all of that. So, if we could get a fact sheet,
anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll just report that the Facilities Committee met, and the outcome of the Facilities Committee meeting was very ably reported by Roy Miller early this evening, so I have nothing to add to Roy's very comprehensive 4-part report from earlier this evening.
Thank you.
With that, let's move on to calendar review.
Yes, let's see. Just a reminder that we have our rescheduled city schools meeting this Thursday, October 11th. There is a finance committee meeting on October 17th, curriculum committee meeting on October 22nd, board meeting October 22nd as well, and then there's another city schools meeting on November 1st, just as a reminder.
Very good. And do we have any items for closed session?
Yes, we do.
Okay, then we'll adjourn to closed session. Thank you very much. Yep, we're adjourned for closed session. Thank you very much.
Roy, there's a typo in 4.1, so on the second reading you can...
A typo in 4.1.
Second line. Second line, or input space OU. We can
I'm
talk
sorry,
about
tell me
it.
again?
4.1,
Yes.
second line, third
Okay.
half word. But we can...
Yeah, let's deal with this offline. Let's move on to the next item. ECCL update.
Yeah, so obviously the purpose of this item is to give the board and the community an update on the number of ongoing activities related to the Emeryville Center of Community Life. And Roy Miller is here today to give 4 updates. One on the phasing and the timeline and where we are in the entire project process. An update on Measure J, Series D bond sale, and the analysis and consideration of that. And then additionally, an update on staff input that he's received related to the schematic design phase. And he has a couple of contracts here that he'd like to go over with you. The library operations program consultant and the Nexus partner contract related to the $48 million alternative that the board asked us to consider. Roy?
Great, thank you. This first slide is a repeat. You've seen this. I'm bringing it back just to keep it front and center because it's really aggressive, and I know I keep saying that, but I think it bears repeating. The schematic design phase we're about halfway through that now, and it completes at the end of November of this year. And then the design development phase, where we look at the chosen design in all of its aspects with all of the full consulting disciplines, that wraps up middle of April of next year. We go beyond that to finish the blueprints for the project, to get the state approvals in early 2014, and to get under construction, meaning actually digging trenches for brand new building foundations, with a construction occupancy date of August 2015. The milestone dates must be achieved. Each one of these has to happen. No phase that we're looking at has any slop in it. The milestone dates are extremely aggressive, and a full array of consulting disciplines is up and running to get these done. I think I want to add this evening that each day of this project is a learning experience for me and for the entire team. I mean, there are so many people working so hard and so fast at this point that I get new information every day that I come to work, and on Saturdays and Sundays. I mean, things are changing and developing very quickly. For the second piece of this, I want to bring to the full board some information that the Facilities Committee heard at our last meeting, and that has to do with funding and financing considerations that are also developing quickly. There's new information that I want the board to be aware of, not asking you for any decisions on any of this. I just want this information to be in front of you. The first part of this you'll notice and that you've seen before. So when we talk about payback ratios for our bond series, if we take a perspective that we're looking at the whole performance of all of the Measure J bonds, we want to figure out how to think about that and how to frame the performance of that. One of the ways to look at it is with a standard 30-year mortgage at either a 5% or a 4% fixed rate that a homeowner could go out and get today with a very good credit rating. And this would allow you to purchase a home, a primary residence. Those kind of payback ratios are in the 1.7, 1.9 kind of range. The bonds that we've already sold, Series A, B, and C, are down around 1.4 to 1, which is extraordinary and completely due to the fact that both Series A and Series B are highly subsidized, federally advantaged programs called the QSCB program. In looking at Series D, you've looked previously with me at a possible $10 million Series D with a set of 30-year maturities that has a payback, an overall payback, when included with all of the series already sold, of about 1.83 to 1, which is still very good. I went back to the financial consultants, to the bond financing folks, and said, what's the maximum that a Series D sale that this district could do anytime at once, later this year, early next year? What's the maximum amount that could be structured within that same 30-year maturity idea? So let's not change the length of the financing. Let's stick with a 30-year financing. How much could we generate? Just to put a kind of an outside bracket on the board's thinking. And the answer is that it's about $16.5 million, depending on the exact interest rate and the day of sale and all that sort of thing. But a $16.5 million Series D could be done. Its overall payback ratio, when added to all of the other bond series that you've sold, would be just barely over 2 to 1.
And that's different from the $20 million payback ratio you've shown us before, because that was a 40-year?
Correct.
Okay.
So then this is the information that makes your eyes go back in your head, but nevertheless, these are the kinds of spreadsheets that the financial consultants are developing that come up with those numbers. And what's really important, and I think what you can see just from the graphic without actually looking at the individual numbers, the third column from the right-hand side of the screen is a representation of Series D. And you can see immediately that the numbers, without even looking at the specific numbers, that did I hit the button?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, that's right.
Whoops, back.
Well, while you're on that back
There.
screen there, actually I had a question. The payback ratios at the bottom, is that at 4% or 5%?
It's at today's interest rates. I don't know exactly what the interest rate of that sale would be,
Okay.
but it's at the today's what the deal that could be done today. So the interest rate risk would be if the board postponed the sale, would the interest rate be higher or lower than it is today? So what I was going to point out just graphically is that you can see in that Series D column that all the big numbers are in the bottom years. And you can see that the numbers increase in size when the columns for Series A, B, and C go blank. That means that those bonds are all paid off. That's when the bulk of the repayment for Series D would occur, in those 10 years or so that are after Series A, B, and C are completely paid back. That is what's called a capital appreciation bond, CAB for short, and this is the same spreadsheet for that $16.5 million series. And the important difference is the very right-hand column. The amount of assessment per $100,000 value of property in the $10 million sale. In those later 10 years, the assessment drops to about $30 plus or minus per 100,000. In order to maximize Series D, you hold that number at closer to $60 per 100,000 all the way out through the repayment of Series D. The reason that I mentioned that the Series D bond is called a CAB, a capital appreciation bond, is because there's a lot of press these days about capital appreciation bonds. And so I want to add one more comment to this as the board thinks about this. There is proposed legislation, has been already and will continue to be, proposed legislation that may change these circumstances in the future for the sale of Series D. The legislation that's been introduced already but has not passed at this point says a couple of things. It says that instead of doing a 30-year financing for Series D, because it's a CAB, the board would be limited to a 25-year financing for Series D. That would impact the amount that Series D could be. We would not be able to do a Series D for $16.5 million if that becomes law. And then the second thing, which is a very good...
Is that state or federal legislation?
This is all state of California. And then the second thing that the legislation that has been introduced but not yet passed says is that the maximum payback ratio for that specific bond series, not the overall performance of all your series, but for that specific bond series, cannot be greater than 4. And even at 16.5, even at the 16.5 bond sale, because it's a 30-year sale, the payback ratio is 3.8. So the law, the new legislation, if and when it's passed, if it reads the way that it's already been introduced, or something close to that, we would still, even though we're a 30-year series rather than 25-year series, we still meet that payback ratio threshold. But we would be impacted by the fact that the allowable maturity schedule may be shorter than the 30-year that we're using here.
So
And that was a measure in the last session of the state legislature, so the question is what will be introduced
Will it be
next year?
reintroduced, except,
So
yes.
I think
Because
that's a good point.
the session's
to monitor.
over.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the session's over and it didn't pass.
It did not pass.
But I think it's a good heads up. I think what it does do is it gives a good guideline as to what the state discussion is
Yes.
for this kind of financing. And I think what I find interesting is that although there's been, accusations about comments about the payback ratios, we're actually well within the payback ratios that are being recommended at the state.
Even proposed for legislation.
But
yes.
I think that the main concern I have is the advice I've heard from a number of bond councils that it's best to issue a bond when you need it and not to issue it so far in advance that we're paying interest on money that's just sitting around unused. And we have a lot of other issues that we're trying to wait and see what happens, such as this $2.9 million issue that we heard earlier. So, but this is a very helpful update. Were there other questions?
If, for example, we issued a $10 million bond, Series D, and later said, you know what, we need another million or two, can we issue
You're kind of out of luck.
Yeah, what are the negative impacts or downside of trying to tweak it?
It would be very difficult to get any additional financing because it would have to be it would have to be far in the future. In other words, it would have to be beyond. It would have to be in that increment that's out beyond the current A, B, and C, and I think cabs are not easy to issue, and they're not easy to issue in small increments. So I think you would find it difficult to garner those little bits of extra dollars if you needed them.
Okay.
I think the other issue, so the longer we wait, the more refined we know about what we need, and the longer we wait, the more we know about what's going to happen in the economic environment around us. And we have this for once we have a good break in that we have the head of the Treasury Department saying that interest rates are going to stay low for the next, well, he said it 6 months ago, and so I think we have 18 months left.
So here's the hard part. And the board is just going to have to play this out over as time goes on here. I think I will predict. Remember, I told you that we're now halfway through the schematic design phase, and I learn a ton about this project every single day. I predict, and I'm sometimes wrong, so who knows what will happen, but I predict that when you're asked to approve schematic design, you're going to have some very hard choices to make. And you're going to have to give direction to the architect and builder team about exactly where they're going and exactly what they're designing. Having an outstanding unknown about how much money you can put together is going to make it tough on you. So add that to your thoughts.
Say that last sentence again. Having
an unknown relating to how much money you can put in the bank to sign this construction contract is going to make it harder, not impossible, harder for you to give very succinct and articulate direction to where the architect and builder teams need to head.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
And then last piece for me tonight, there are a couple of contracts that have come up in this past few weeks. The first one is for a library operations and program management consultant. The Nexus team is employing a library design consultant, someone who actually physically designs libraries. This consultant has been working with that team, but under our contract. This consultant is the one that actually looks at how we think about this library as a part of a public library system, how we think about staffing and managing this future library. They're the folks who help us put together the operations model for library at ECCL. And so this contract takes them all the way through the process of developing that model with us. Any questions about that one?
I don't see any questions. Do any members of the public have questions about any of the ECCL items that have been discussed? Hearing none?
The only question on the library is this is for both the school library and the community library, how they're going to work together?
Yes, but I have to say it's mostly about the public library, but absolutely how those things work together and how we maximize those opportunities, that's also part of their scope.
And are these folks planning to talk to the librarians and the teachers?
They already have.
The school staff?
They've already done interviews with not just library staff, but with staff in general, and even parents and even students as well.
I'm just going to make a comment in general about these contracts, and I know, everything is a deadline. We're working really hard to, to get things done, but, these contracts really should be coming to the board before services is performed. We had a board.
This one is. This one is. They have not done this yet.
The library?
They've done some work with us, but they did that under a small initial contract.
This is a subcontractor.
That was last spring.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah. This is work that's coming up.
Yeah.
My apologies.
And I see that they're contracted to attend the community meetings and participate in them, and I think it's all very good. My understanding is they're focusing their work on having Alameda County operate the library.
So I don't know what the conclusion will be.
Okay, so that
is one of the issues that we'll be investigating.
Okay, well that's very good, and that will help as we enter into the governance discussions, which I think it's critical for us to move.
And both of the consultants that are involved here have been Alameda County librarians and Alameda County library managers, so they know the system upside down.
Right. Excellent, excellent. This is not a first reading, so do we have a motion?
Wouldn't these come back on consent?
It can. Yeah. Absolutely. I can bring them back.
To bring them on consent?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
And then I also want to point out the second one. Now, this one is an exception, and I apologize for this, but this one is work that has been done. This was the work that we asked the Nexus team to do to generate that feasibility study for us. I can't tell you how hard it was for them and for all of us really to get them up and running again on the conceptual design work, and also pay it time and attention to doing a really good job of this feasibility analysis. And I think they did a superb job. And that information is going to pay off for us in ways that we didn't even imagine. I mean, I think it got them very, very familiar with the existing set of facilities around here. It's going to help us from now on in terms of demolition plans and all the rest.
Okay, so this work is being applied to the ongoing work, so that sounds good. Any other questions about this? Nope. So all this.
Only that it was work that we asked be done. I was surprised at the $137,000 price tag, but it was important for us to have a understanding of the contingencies, given all the contingencies that were out there, whether or not redevelopment money is going to come through, whether or not the state's going to contest or take issue with that. So I'm glad we did it. I guess in the future, when we take this kind of action, I think it behooves us as a board to also get a cost estimate for the implications of the decisions that were made.
Right. I think in all fairness to staff, the dilemma is, given the time frames we're on, because of the delays that we had with redevelopment you know, it's put us months behind schedule. I think staff was right to move forward as they did at our direction. But I think we as a board have to be very careful of the additional work that we ask for, and cognizant that to keep the schedule, we have a choice. You know, we need the information because we're making tens of millions of dollar decisions, but there is a cost to that.
Could I also say that
doing that at this speed?
And I agree. I'm agreeing. I think we're in agreement.
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
Exactly.
I didn't ask the question.
Right. The board.
I didn't hear any of us ask the question. How much is this going to cost for us to get this?
I wouldn't have known on that first occasion. Yeah. In fact, so what I wanted to add to the conversation is just so the board knows, I don't take these contracts lightly, and the $137,000 that you see is not the first number that I saw. Mm-hmm. It's significantly lower than the first number that I saw.
We appreciate your whittling that down.
And it's a fair representation of the work that they and their team did.
And as you said, tens of thousands of dollars of that are going to continue to inure to the benefit
Absolutely.
of the work.
They learned a lot through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else on this? If not, we'll move on, and these will be on the consent calendar for the next meeting. Enrollment.
And then there's another city schools meeting on November 1st, just as a reminder.
Very good. And do we have any items for closed session?
Yes, we do.
Okay, then we'll adjourn to closed session. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're adjourned for closed session.